The buzz in the tech world was palpable, like the calm before a storm. Elon Musk was about to attend a prestigious conference in Silicon Valley, and the energy in the room was electric. Journalists milled about, their cameras poised and ready, waiting for the world-renowned innovator to take the stage. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. After all, when Elon Musk spoke, the world listened. But today, something extraordinary was about to happen. It wasn't a groundbreaking announcement or a major unveiling. It was a challenge, unlike any Musk had faced before. In the back of the crowded conference hall, a young boy sat in the front row. He was only 12 years old, yet his presence was undeniable. Ethan Carter, with his calm demeanor and sharp eyes, didn't look like the typical tech enthusiast. No, this was no ordinary kid. His mind had been described by some as nothing short of genius, a prodigy with an intellect that defied logic. As the attendees whispered, they couldn't help but wonder, who was this child, and what was he doing here? The moment Elon Musk stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. His presence was magnetic, his every word followed by a wave of awe. But just as he started his keynote speech, a voice interrupted. "I challenge you, Elon Musk." A small, steady voice rang out across the room. Everyone froze. The crowd turned to see Ethan standing, his eyes locked with Elon's. For a moment, the room was still, as if time itself had paused. Elon, always quick to respond, raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" His tone was calm, almost curious. Ethan's voice didn't waver. "I challenge you to a contest, a test of intellect. I've memorized pi to 70,000 digits. I want to see if you can match me." A murmur ran through the crowd. The challenge was audacious. Pi to 70,000 digits? Elon Musk, known for his brilliance in engineering, space exploration, and artificial intelligence, had been faced with many impossible feats in his career. But this? A mere child claiming to have memorized an infinite number of decimals? It was absurd. And yet, something in Ethan's demeanor told Elon that this wasn't a prank. "I don't know if this is a joke or not," Elon said, a slight chuckle escaping him. "But if you really have done that, I'm intrigued." The crowd erupted into a mix of laughter and disbelief, but Ethan remained unfazed. He stood tall, a young prodigy in the face of the world's most brilliant minds. "I'll prove it," Ethan said confidently. A ripple of excitement washed over the room. The challenge was set. The question now was not whether Elon Musk would accept it, but how he would respond. The tech mogul wasn't one to back down from a challenge, no matter how bizarre it seemed. Elon turned to the crowd, his usual confidence returning. "All right, I accept. Let's see what this kid is made of." The audience was electrified. This wasn't just a test of numbers. It was a battle between two very different kinds of intelligence. On one side, the world's most famous entrepreneur, known for his revolutionary work in technology and space exploration. On the other, a 12-year-old boy with an incredible memory that might just defy the boundaries of human cognition. As Elon walked to the stage, a camera zoomed in on his face, capturing his expression. A mix of skepticism, curiosity, and the faintest hint of amusement. Ethan, meanwhile, stood with a quiet confidence, already prepared to showcase his mind in a way no one could have expected. The first few rows of the audience were murmuring in excitement, whispering about this unlikely challenge. Elon Musk had built rockets, revolutionized electric cars, and redefined space travel. But here, in this moment, he faced a completely different kind of contest. A contest that, until now, he had never even imagined. With a slight nod from Elon, the room fell silent. A timer was set. The stage was now set for the ultimate intellectual face-off, and the world was watching. Who would come out on top? The challenge was on, and no one could have predicted how it would change everything. Ethan Carter wasn't just another child with a love for numbers. He was a phenomenon. Growing up in a quiet suburb of San Francisco, Ethan's brilliance was evident even before he could spell his own name. His parents, both scientists, recognized his extraordinary ability early on. They were the kind of parents who didn't push their child to excel, but who couldn't ignore the signs of his exceptional mind. At the age of 5, Ethan was solving basic algebraic equations in his head, while his peers struggled with simple addition. By the time he was 7, his obsession with numbers had grown beyond arithmetic. He began to memorize strings of numbers, long sequences that most people would consider too tedious to remember. Pi was his favorite. The infinite, never-ending nature of pi fascinated him. It was like a puzzle that had no end, a challenge that never got boring. When he turned 8, Ethan had memorized pi to 10,000 digits. It was a feat that stunned his parents, and soon, word of his abilities spread through the academic community. At first, people thought it was a trick, something that a child might do once or twice for attention. But as Ethan continued to rattle off the digits, each one coming from his memory with stunning accuracy, doubts turned into awe. The boy's capacity for memory was something out of the ordinary. But Ethan wasn't just a walking calculator. He was a quiet, introspective child. His mind worked differently than most, but he didn't care about fame or recognition. His true passion wasn't in showing off what he could do. It was in understanding the deeper patterns behind the numbers. He had a dream: to use his gifts to solve problems that had never been solved before, to contribute to humanity in ways that no one could imagine. Ethan's family was supportive, but not overbearing. His father, a physicist, would often encourage him to explore different fields, while his mother, a neurologist, marveled at how his brain seemed to process information. But it wasn't always easy. While Ethan was brilliant in the academic world, he was often misunderstood by his peers. Other children his age found him strange, an outsider. His classmates couldn't relate to his love of math or his obsession with pi. Ethan, however, didn't mind. The numbers were his friends, his constant companions. They didn't judge or mock him. They simply existed. But Ethan's life was not without hardship. When he was just 10 years old, his parents were involved in a tragic car accident. His father, who had been his greatest mentor and friend, didn't survive. Ethan's world was turned upside down. The grief was overwhelming, and the numbers he had once found comfort in now seemed distant and cold. For months, he shut himself off from the world, unable to process the pain. His mother, struggling to keep the family together, encouraged him to keep learning, to keep growing. But Ethan's mind was fractured, his focus scattered. It wasn't until he rediscovered his love for pi, that endless, unbroken sequence, that he began to heal. Pi, with its infinite nature, reminded Ethan of the infinite possibilities in life. The tragedy of his father's death couldn't erase the endless potential of his own mind. Ethan's connection to numbers deepened, and he returned to his practice with renewed vigor. He memorized pi to 30,000 digits, then 40,000, and eventually, when he was just 12 years old, he hit 70,000. It was a feat that no one, not even the most advanced computers, had been able to replicate in such a short time. And with this newfound focus, Ethan realized something greater. He wanted to show the world what he could do, but more importantly, he wanted to prove that intelligence, in its purest form, wasn't about accolades or fame. It was about using one's mind to solve problems and inspire others. And so, Ethan found himself at that conference, staring at the most famous tech mogul of the century. He knew the challenge he was about to issue would change everything. Musk was no ordinary person. He was a visionary, a man who had reshaped industries. Yet Ethan wasn't intimidated. If anything, he felt a deep sense of purpose. This was more than just a challenge. It was an opportunity to show the world that brilliance wasn't confined to Silicon Valley or the tech elite. It was in the hands of people like him, people who saw the world through a different lens. As the crowd murmured behind him, Ethan's mind was calm. He wasn't nervous. He had memorized pi to 70,000 digits, and his mind had prepared him for this moment in ways that no one could understand. His eyes met Elon Musk's, and he knew it was time. The challenge was set. He wasn't just challenging Musk's intellect. He was challenging the very idea of what it meant to be brilliant. The room buzzed with an electric anticipation as Ethan Carter stood at the center of it all. The tech conference, a gathering of the brightest minds in the industry, had been building to this moment. Everyone had gathered to hear Elon Musk's keynote speech, to marvel at the new advancements in space exploration, AI, and renewable energy. But it was Ethan, the unassuming 12-year-old prodigy, who now commanded the attention of the entire audience. Ethan's heart beat steadily in his chest, each thump a reminder of his purpose. He had studied Musk for years, followed his ventures from PayPal to SpaceX, and admired the way Musk thought beyond the conventional. Musk was a visionary, someone who pushed boundaries. But Ethan had his own way of thinking, his own vision. He wasn't interested in the same accolades that Musk had achieved. Instead, he wanted to challenge the very notion of genius itself. The crowd grew silent as the tension mounted. Musk, standing near the stage, adjusted his posture and smiled. His trademark smirk, the one that signaled he was ready for anything. The billionaire mogul's confidence was legendary, but now he was facing something he hadn't anticipated. A challenge from a child. "Mr. Musk," Ethan began, his voice steady but carrying a hint of nervous excitement, "I challenge you to a test of intellect. I've memorized pi to 70,000 digits, and I'll recite them for you. But I'll take it a step further. I want you to match me with something of your own, something that can't be solved by a machine or calculated in an algorithm. If you can do that, I'll consider this challenge a draw. But if you can't, well, the world will know there's more than one kind of genius." The room remained dead silent. This wasn't just a playful challenge. This was an assertion of Ethan's unique intelligence, an attempt to force the world to look beyond traditional boundaries and see the true potential of the human mind. The audience shifted in their seats, some eyes widening with disbelief, others squinting in doubt. It was a bold statement, perhaps even reckless, but Ethan didn't care. For him, this was a moment of reckoning. Musk took a moment to absorb what was happening. His brow furrowed slightly, and for the briefest moment, he seemed taken aback. But then, the smirk returned. Elon Musk was not a man who shied away from challenges. In fact, he thrived on them. Whether it was building rockets or creating the world's most advanced electric cars, Musk had built his empire by defying expectations. "You want me to match you, huh?" Musk said, his voice smooth, confident. "All right, kid. I'm game." Ethan could feel the energy shift in the room. The challenge had been laid out, and now it was a matter of execution. Musk wasn't backing down, but neither was Ethan. Both were determined in their own right, each with a different approach to intellect. Musk believed in solving problems through technology, big ideas, and innovation. Ethan believed in the purity of human potential, what the mind could achieve without the need for machines. "Start whenever you're ready," Musk said, his voice low and even, and with a quick glance to the audience, he added, "This should be interesting." Ethan didn't flinch. He'd been preparing for this moment his whole life. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and then began to speak. 3.14159265535. The digits of pi flowed effortlessly from his mouth, each number coming out precisely, like a perfect rhythm. The crowd was entranced, some members whispering to each other in disbelief. It was one thing to memorize a string of numbers, but it was another to recall them with such ease, without hesitation, without missing a beat. As Ethan continued, Musk's expression shifted from curiosity to admiration. He had seen many brilliant people in his life, but this was something else. The room was completely captivated, hanging on every word Ethan spoke. The young boy was performing a mental feat that few adults, let alone anyone in the tech world, could hope to replicate. Ethan reached the 10,000th digit and then the 20,000th. The numbers kept coming, and the tension in the room escalated with every recited digit. He was nearing the 70,000th digit, the goal he had set for himself. Musk stood motionless, his hands behind his back, watching intently. He had seen brilliance before, but there was something profoundly humbling about witnessing a 12-year-old perform such a task. At the 69,000th digit, Ethan's focus sharpened. He could feel the weight of the moment, the eyes of the world on him. He took a quick glance at Musk, who was now standing with his arms folded across his chest, his eyes narrowed in concentration. The entire room had fallen into an almost reverential silence, except for Ethan's voice, reciting the digits, one by one, as though he were speaking a language all his own. Then, finally, Ethan reached the 70,000th digit. He paused for a moment, allowing the gravity of the accomplishment to settle over him. The room erupted into applause. It wasn't just a performance, it was a declaration. Ethan had proven something profound. That genius wasn't just about logic or invention. It was about the power of the mind, the untapped potential that every person had within them. But as the applause died down, the challenge wasn't over. Musk's eyes gleamed with a mix of amusement and challenge. He wasn't going to let this stand unanswered. "Impressive," Musk said, his voice filled with genuine respect. "But as I said, I'm not here to just match your numbers. You wanted me to show you something that can't be solved by a machine or calculated. Well, I think you've seen enough of my machines, haven't you?" He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I'll give you something that no algorithm can crack," Musk said, stepping forward with a new intensity. "But first, I want you to understand one thing. Brilliance comes in many forms. The mind is powerful, but so is the ability to innovate and change the world." The room held its breath. The rising conflict between them had just begun. Would Ethan's mind, sharp as it was, be enough to outwit a visionary like Elon Musk? The stage was set, and the world was waiting for the next move. The air in the conference room was thick with anticipation. Ethan had just completed an unprecedented feat, and the world was watching. Elon Musk had been momentarily silent after Ethan's pie challenge, but the silence was anything but passive. Ethan could feel it in the room. Musk was about to raise the stakes. Musk adjusted his jacket and stepped forward, his gaze focused not just on Ethan, but on the entire audience, as though he was preparing to reveal something monumental. His hands were steady at his sides, but his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, betrayed an intensity that few ever saw in public. "You've shown the world what you're capable of, Ethan," Musk said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of challenge. "But what you don't understand is that intelligence isn't just about the mind. It's about how you see the world, how you shape the future. And that, my young friend, is something you can't calculate or memorize." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Musk's words were both a compliment and a challenge, and he didn't quite know how to respond. He had grown up believing that intellect was the key to everything, that if you had the right information, the right mental edge, you could solve any problem. But Musk's words were starting to gnaw at him. What did he mean by shaping the future? Was there something beyond numbers and facts? Musk raised a hand, and the lights in the room dimmed slightly. A large screen descended from the ceiling, and a video began to play. It was a recording of a rocket launch, the kind Musk was famously known for. The crowd recognized it immediately. It was the launch of SpaceX's Falcon Heavy, one of the most ambitious private space missions ever undertaken. The video played for several moments, showcasing the power of the rocket, the stunning visuals of the spacecraft soaring into the sky. But then, the screen froze, and the sound of the rocket's engines cut out. The image shifted, revealing a live feed of Musk standing in front of a whiteboard, scribbling equations and technical diagrams. The screen zoomed in on one particular equation. Ethan's eyes widened as he recognized the notation. It was advanced calculus, integrated with quantum mechanics, fields he had only scratched the surface of in his studies. The equations were complex, but they weren't just numbers. They told a story, one about the fundamental forces of the universe, about space, time, and human potential. "Here's where things get interesting," Musk said, a slight grin on his face. "This is what I've been working on for the past year. An equation that could theoretically alter the way we perceive gravity. If we can figure this out, it could revolutionize space travel. And we're not just talking about Mars. We're talking about reaching the stars." The room was silent. Ethan could feel the weight of Musk's words, the enormity of what he was presenting. This wasn't just a test of intellectual prowess. This was something far more profound. Musk wasn't showing him an equation for fun. He was showing Ethan a glimpse into the future, a challenge that required more than raw knowledge. Ethan swallowed hard. He had memorized numbers, solved complex puzzles, and demonstrated a mind that few could rival. But this was different. Musk was asking him to think not just with his mind, but with his creativity, to understand the deeper implications of what lay before them. "Here's the real question, Ethan," Musk continued, his tone becoming more serious. "Can you see the bigger picture? Can you use your intelligence not just to memorize numbers or solve problems, but to innovate, to create something that hasn't been done yet? To change the world in a way no one has imagined?" Ethan stood still, his mind racing. He could see the complexity of the equation, But the idea of changing the world? That seemed almost too much. He had never been asked to think like this. His mind had always been focused on logic, on solving the immediate puzzle, on proving his genius. But Musk was asking him to transcend that, to look beyond the numbers and consider the impact of his work on the world. As Musk's words sank in, Ethan realized that the challenge had shifted. It wasn't just about intellect anymore. It was about vision. It was about the ability to see the future, to imagine the impossible, and then find a way to make it real. Ethan's own perception of genius was beginning to unravel, piece by piece. But then, Musk did something unexpected. He stepped back, his hands open in a gesture of invitation. "Your turn, Ethan," Musk said, his voice laced with both challenge and encouragement. "Solve the equation. Find a way to take this idea and make it something tangible. If you can do that, I'll call this a tie. But if you can't," he paused, the tension building once more, "then I'll show you what real innovation looks like." Ethan felt the weight of the moment. It wasn't just about answering a question. It was about demonstrating the future, about proving that intelligence, creativity, and vision could coexist, each elevating the other. Musk wasn't simply testing his knowledge. He was testing his ability to think beyond the limits of what was possible. The room fell silent as Ethan's mind whirred. He was on the precipice of something enormous, and in that moment, he realized just how much more there was to genius than what he had initially understood. The world wasn't waiting for another prodigy. It was waiting for someone who could create something new, something revolutionary. Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure if he could solve Musk's equation. But one thing was certain. This was a challenge unlike anything he had faced before. The world watched, holding its breath, as Ethan prepared to take his next step into the unknown. Ethan stood before the whiteboard, his hands trembling slightly as he faced the equation that Elon Musk had just introduced. The numbers seemed to blur together in his mind, the intricate calculus and quantum mechanics interwoven in ways that both fascinated and overwhelmed him. He had memorized pi to 70,000 digits, but this was something else entirely. This was not about rote memory. It was about unlocking a completely new realm of understanding, something far beyond what he had ever imagined. The room was silent except for the sound of his breath, each inhale feeling deeper than the last. Ethan felt his heart race, the pressure mounting with each passing second. The challenge Musk had thrown at him wasn't just a test of his mental prowess. It was a test of his ability to transcend what he knew and dive into the unknown. It was as if Musk had handed him a key to a door that led to a universe of possibilities, and now Ethan had to decide whether he was ready to step through. He glanced over at Musk, who stood in the background, arms crossed, watching him with that calm, almost predatory gaze. Musk wasn't just waiting for him to solve an equation. He was waiting to see if Ethan could grasp the larger concept, the concept of creating, innovating, and understanding in a way that went beyond the boundaries of conventional thought. Ethan took a deep breath. His mind buzzed with calculations, but nothing seemed to connect. The equations on the board were like an abstract painting, complex, beautiful, and almost impossible to decipher. And yet, in the deepest corners of his mind, Ethan knew there was an answer hidden somewhere. He just had to find it. He reached for the chalk, his fingers still slightly unsteady, and began to trace the first part of the equation. It was a formula for gravitational fields, a theory that, if understood and applied, could revolutionize the way humans traveled through space. The problem was that the equation wasn't just theoretical. It was incomplete. There were variables, unknowns that needed to be filled in, like pieces of a puzzle that had yet to be found. Ethan's mind worked feverishly, trying to process the different components. He'd learned about gravitational fields in his advanced physics classes, but this was on another level. This wasn't just about formulas or facts. This was about understanding the fundamental forces of nature in a way that could change the entire course of human history. But as he focused, something unexpected happened. The numbers and equations began to shift in his mind. Instead of seeing them as isolated components, he began to see connections, patterns that weren't immediately obvious. The variables on the board started to make sense in a new way, as if he could feel them, not just calculate them. He started to understand that this wasn't just about solving a problem. It was about vision, about seeing what others couldn't see and creating something that no one had ever imagined. As Ethan worked, his mind began to race ahead, not just solving the equations, but adding new elements, ideas that had never been considered before. He scribbled more equations on the board, his hand moving faster than his brain could process. The chalk seemed to flow naturally, as if it was no longer in his control but part of something greater, a vision that was unfolding in real time. Ethan's heart pounded. The idea of an interstellar arc, a spacecraft that could carry humanity to new worlds, was beyond anything he had ever imagined. But why do you need me? I mean, you've got the best scientists and engineers in the world working for you. What could I possibly bring to the table? Musk's expression grew serious. It's true. I have some of the brightest minds on the planet working on this. But sometimes, brilliance isn't enough. What we're facing isn't just a technical challenge, it's a conceptual one. We need someone who can think outside the box, someone who sees the world differently. Your ability to memorize and recognize patterns isn't just a party trick, Ethan. It's a skill that could unlock solutions we haven't even considered. Ethan felt a mixture of pride and pressure. The idea that his unique talents could play a role in something so monumental was thrilling, but it was also daunting. What kind of challenges are you talking about? He asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Musk tapped the tablet, and the schematic zoomed in on a section labeled cryostasis systems. This is one of them, he said. If we're going to send humans on long-term missions into deep space, we need a way to keep them alive and healthy for years, even decades. Cryostasis is one option, but the science is still in its infancy. We've run into issues with maintaining cell integrity during the freezing and thawing process. Ethan studied the diagram intently. The cryostasis systems were incredibly complex, with layers of interconnected components that looked like a maze of possibilities and pitfalls. As he traced the lines with his eyes, something began to click in his mind. A pattern, a potential solution. What if? Ethan began, hesitating as the idea formed in his head. What if you used a modified magnetic field to stabilize the cellular structure during the freezing process? It could reduce the risk of ice crystals forming and damaging the cells. Musk's eyes lit up with interest. A magnetic field? That's an unconventional approach, but it might just work. Go on. Ethan leaned forward, his mind racing. If you could create a field strong enough to align the molecules in the cells, it could prevent the kind of structural damage that usually happens during freezing. And if you integrated that with a controlled thawing mechanism, you could minimize cellular degradation during reanimation. Musk finished, nodding thoughtfully. It's brilliant, and exactly the kind of thinking we need. Ethan's cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and disbelief. He had just pitched an idea to Elon Musk, and Musk had called it brilliant. The weight of the moment was almost too much to handle, but he forced himself to stay focused. You've done it, Ethan, Musk said, his voice filled with both admiration and challenge. But this is only the beginning. What you've done here today is more than just math. It's about vision, about thinking in ways that no one else can. And that's the true genius. Ethan's heart swelled with pride, but also with a sense of wonder. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something far greater than he had ever imagined. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the board with the equation he had just written. The weight of Musk's words hung in the air, thick and powerful. You've done it, Ethan. But this is only the beginning, Musk had said. Those words reverberated in Ethan's mind, almost as if they were a challenge that pushed him beyond what he thought he was capable of. As the room erupted in applause, Ethan's mind was far from the cheers and the cameras. His eyes remained glued to the equations, absorbing every line, every curve. There was a hum of excitement around him, but inside, a different feeling was taking over. Uncertainty. He had solved the problem, yes. But Musk's statement lingered. What was next? What did this mean for him? For the world? Elon, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper as he turned toward the man who had watched him struggle, then soar. What now? What do I do with this? Musk's gaze sharpened. His eyes gleamed with that familiar intensity, the look of someone who didn't just see the present, but could see the endless possibilities that lay ahead. You're not done, Ethan, Musk said. This world of equations, of physics, of space, it's not about solving problems. It's about creating new ones, and not just solving them. It's about revolutionizing how we live, how we think. You've opened a door. Now, it's time to walk through it. Ethan's heart pounded. The thought of stepping into the unknown was both exhilarating and terrifying. He had just been a kid with a head full of numbers, but now, Musk was offering him something far bigger, a chance to change the world. Revolutionizing how? Ethan asked, the uncertainty still clouding his thoughts. He knew the potential of his discovery, but the leap from theory to reality felt daunting. He had memorized pi to 70,000 digits. He had passed every test. But the world Musk was talking about wasn't something that could be calculated with numbers alone. It was a world of innovation, of risk. Musk smiled, a flicker of something almost unrecognizable crossing his face. That's the beauty of it, Ethan. The world doesn't have all the answers. It's full of problems, yes, but it's also full of endless possibilities. What if you could design the future? Ethan blinked. Design the future? The thought of having that kind of power, that kind of responsibility, felt immense. Musk nodded, the lines of his face tightening with purpose. Yes, you've got the mind for it. But more than that, you've got the heart to make it real. That's where most people fail. They think too small. They're scared of failure, of risk. But risk is the path to innovation. If you want to change the world, you have to be willing to step outside what everyone else thinks is possible. Ethan's stomach twisted. The weight of Musk's words wasn't just theoretical. It was real. The reality of what Musk was saying hit him like a ton of bricks. The math wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about vision, about changing everything he had ever known. But what if I fail? Ethan asked, his voice filled with doubt. What if I make a mistake? What if I can't handle it? Musk took a slow step toward him, his expression softening slightly. Failure is part of it, Ethan. I've failed more times than I can count. But each time, I learned something new. Something that brought me closer to understanding the bigger picture. It's not about how many times you fall. It's about how many times you get back up. So, if you're asking whether you're ready, the answer is yes. You're ready. But you'll never know how far you can go until you try. Ethan swallowed, his pulse quickening as he took in Musk's words. He had always been the kid who memorized facts, who followed the rules. But this was different. This was a challenge, a call to arms. And suddenly, the numbers didn't seem so important. It wasn't about memorizing pi or solving equations. It was about something deeper, something greater. It was about changing the way people thought, the way the world worked. A spark ignited in Ethan's chest. For the first time, he wasn't just a kid with a crazy talent. He was someone who had the potential to do something monumental. Musk continued, his voice low and thoughtful. There's a project I'm working on, a mission to revolutionize the way we travel across the universe. It's ambitious, some might even say impossible, but I'm convinced that with the right mind, the right vision, it's within reach. I'd like you to be a part of it. Ethan's eyes widened. A mission to travel across the universe? Musk nodded. Yes. The world as we know it is small. Space is vast. But humanity's greatest achievements come from pushing boundaries. This isn't just about space exploration. It's about rewriting what we believe is possible. What if we could use your mind, your ability to see patterns no one else can, to unlock something that's never been done before? Ethan's heart raced. This was it, the moment he had always dreamed of, but never imagined would come so soon. This was the opportunity to take his knowledge, his potential, and use it to truly change the world. I'm in, Ethan said without hesitation, the words spilling from him before he even had time to think about them. It wasn't just excitement that drove him. It was the sense that this was his moment, the one he had been preparing for his entire life. Musk was offering him a seat at the table where the future was being shaped, and he wasn't going to let that chance slip away. Musk smiled, a rare moment of warmth crossing his face. I knew you'd say that. Welcome aboard, Ethan. Let's change the world. As the realization settled over Ethan, something incredible began to happen. The room, the people, the challenge, it all faded away. What mattered now was the journey ahead. And in that moment, Ethan knew that he wasn't just facing off against Elon Musk, he was joining him. Together, they were going to create a future that no one had ever dreamed possible. Ethan sat in the sleek Tesla Model X, gliding silently through the streets of Los Angeles, still trying to process what had just happened. His parents were in a separate car, still stunned by the events of the day. The car's autopilot handled the drive seamlessly, but the hum of its electric engine seemed to mirror the buzz of thoughts racing through Ethan's mind. He had just agreed to join Elon Musk on a mission to revolutionize space travel. The enormity of that decision was sinking in, and with every passing second, the reality felt more surreal. Musk sat beside him, his tablet glowing faintly as he swiped through complex diagrams and calculations. "Are you ready for this?" Musk asked, breaking the silence. His tone was calm, but his piercing gaze made it clear that this was not a rhetorical question. Ethan took a deep breath. "I think so. But what exactly are we working on? You mentioned something about space travel, but you didn't give many details." Musk smiled faintly, as if he'd been waiting for that question. He tapped on the tablet and handed it to Ethan. "Take a look." Ethan's eyes widened as he stared at the screen. It displayed a schematic of what looked like a massive spacecraft, unlike anything he had ever seen. The design was sleek and futuristic, with intricate components labeled in fine detail. But what caught his attention was the project name at the top, Project Eternus. Project Eternus? Ethan read aloud, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Yes," Musk said, leaning back in his seat. "It's a project we've been working on for years, but we've hit a wall. The goal is simple: to build a spacecraft capable of sustaining human life indefinitely in space, not just for exploration, but for colonization. We're talking about creating humanity's first true interstellar ark." Ethan's heart pounded. The idea of an interstellar ark, a spacecraft that could carry humanity to new worlds, was beyond anything he had ever imagined. "But why do you need me? I mean, you've got the best scientists and engineers in the world working for you. What could I possibly bring to the table?" Musk's expression grew serious. "It's true. I have some of the brightest minds on the planet working on this. But sometimes, brilliance isn't enough. What we're facing isn't just a technical challenge, it's a conceptual one. We need someone who can think outside the box, someone who sees the world differently. Your ability to memorize and recognize patterns isn't just a party trick, Ethan. It's a skill that could unlock solutions we haven't even considered." Ethan felt a mixture of pride and pressure. The idea that his unique talents could play a role in something so monumental was thrilling, but it was also daunting. "What kind of challenges are you talking about?" he asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Musk tapped the tablet, and the schematic zoomed in on a section labeled Cryostasis Systems. "This is one of them," he said. "If we're going to send humans on long-term missions into deep space, we need a way to keep them alive and healthy for years, even decades. Cryostasis is one option, but the science is still in its infancy. We've run into issues with maintaining cell integrity during the freezing and thawing process." Ethan studied the diagram intently. The cryostasis systems were incredibly complex, with layers of interconnected components that looked like a maze of possibilities and pitfalls. As he traced the lines with his eyes, something began to click in his mind. A pattern, a potential solution. "What if," Ethan began, hesitating as the idea formed in his head. "What if you used a modified magnetic field to stabilize the cellular structure during the freezing process? It could reduce the risk of ice crystals forming and damaging the cells." Musk's eyes lit up with interest. "A magnetic field? That's an unconventional approach, but it might just work. Go on." Ethan leaned forward, his mind racing. "If you could create a field strong enough to align the molecules in the cells, it could prevent the kind of structural damage that usually happens during freezing. And if you integrated that with a controlled thawing mechanism, you could minimize cellular degradation during reanimation." Musk finished, nodding thoughtfully. "It's brilliant, and exactly the kind of thinking we need." Ethan's cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and disbelief. He had just pitched an idea to Elon Musk, and Musk had called it brilliant. The weight of the moment was almost too much to handle, but he forced himself to stay focused. Musk smiled, a rare expression of genuine excitement crossing his face. You see, Ethan, this is why you're here. You see patterns and solutions where others don't. And that's just the beginning. If you're willing to put in the work, there's no limit to what we can accomplish together. Ethan nodded, his determination hardening. I'm ready, whatever it takes. The car slowed as they arrived at their destination, SpaceX headquarters. The massive complex loomed ahead, its futuristic design glowing softly in the evening light. For Ethan, it felt like stepping into another world, a world where the impossible became possible. As they entered the building, Musk led him through a series of secure checkpoints and into a vast laboratory filled with cutting-edge technology. Engineers and scientists bustled about, their conversations a mix of technical jargon and hushed excitement. In the center of the room stood a massive holographic display of Project Eternus, its intricate design rotating slowly in midair. This, Musk said, gesturing to the hologram, is where the future begins. And you, Ethan, are now a part of it. Ethan stared at the hologram, a mixture of awe and determination in his eyes. He had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but one thing was certain. This was his chance to make a difference, to leave his mark on the world and beyond. The glass doors of SpaceX headquarters slid open, revealing a world Ethan had only glimpsed in documentaries and articles. The buzz of activity was palpable. Engineers debated over schematics, technicians adjusted machinery, and holographic projections flickered with cutting-edge designs. It was a hive of innovation, pulsating with the energy of people working to redefine humanity's limits. Ethan followed Musk through the sprawling complex, feeling like an outsider stepping into a sacred temple of science. Every corner seemed to hold a new marvel, 3D printers fabricating rocket components, robotic arms assembling intricate machinery, and laboratories filled with experiments he couldn't even begin to understand. This is incredible, Ethan murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of activity. This, Musk said, gesturing broadly, is where the impossible becomes possible. And now, Ethan, you're part of it. As they walked, Musk explained the layout. We'll be assigning you to a team within the Advanced Concepts Division, the people responsible for thinking up and testing the ideas that seem, well, crazy to everyone else. It's not just about solving today's problems. It's about creating tomorrow's breakthroughs. Ethan swallowed hard. The weight of expectation was enormous, but the excitement coursing through him was even greater. What exactly will I be working on? He asked. Musk paused in front of a glass-walled conference room where a group of scientists huddled around a hologram of a spacecraft engine. For now, you'll start with Project Eternus. Specifically, we want your input on the cryostasis systems. But don't be surprised if other challenges find their way to your desk. Around here, ideas move fast. The doors slid open, and Musk led Ethan into the room. The conversation inside ceased immediately as all eyes turned to them. The room was filled with a mix of seasoned engineers, young innovators, and one particularly stern-looking man who exuded authority. Everyone, Musk said, his tone commanding yet casual. This is Ethan. He'll be joining the Advanced Concepts team. He has a knack for seeing patterns most people miss, and I'm confident he'll be a valuable asset. A murmur spread through the room. Some faces showed curiosity, others displayed skepticism. The stern man, who appeared to be the team lead, crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. With all due respect, Elon, he said, his voice sharp, this is a high-stakes project. Is this really the time to bring in a kid? Ethan felt a flush rise to his cheeks, but before he could respond, Musk stepped in. Dr. Kavanaugh, you know as well as I do that innovation doesn't come with an age requirement. Ethan's insights might be exactly what we need to move forward. Give him a chance. Dr. Kavanaugh sighed, but nodded reluctantly. Fine, but he'll have to prove himself. Musk turned to Ethan, a small, encouraging smile on his face. I think you'll do just fine. With that, Musk left the room, leaving Ethan alone with the team. Dr. Kavanaugh wasted no time. All right, Ethan, he said, gesturing to the hologram. If you're here, you must have some brilliant ideas. Take a look at this. We're trying to stabilize the molecular structure of cells during the cryostasis process. So far, Every solution we've tried has resulted in either cell damage or unviable energy requirements. Got any miracles up your sleeve? Ethan stepped closer to the hologram, his heart pounding. The schematic was dizzyingly complex, but as he studied it, he began to notice patterns, inefficiencies, redundancies, and potential solutions. Slowly, he raised his hand and traced a line through the projection. This section here, he said, his voice gaining confidence, the cooling mechanism. It's working against the natural flow of thermal conductivity. If you reverse the polarity of the heat transfer system and integrate a magnetic field alignment, you could reduce cellular damage significantly. The room went silent. Then, one of the younger engineers leaned forward, his eyes wide. Wait, that could actually work. Dr. Kavanaugh frowned, clearly unwilling to admit he was impressed. It's unconventional, but we can run some simulations. Ethan nodded. I can help set them up. I've been working with simulation software for years. Dr. Kavanaugh's frown deepened, but he didn't argue. Fine, let's see what you've got. Over the next few hours, Ethan worked with the team to implement his idea into their simulation software. It was a crash course in collaboration. Some team members were supportive, others skeptical, but Ethan held his ground. He didn't have all the answers, but his passion and determination were undeniable. As the first simulation began to run, the room fell silent. The hologram displayed the molecular structure of a cell, showing how it responded to the modified cryostasis process. The results were astounding. Cellular damage was reduced by nearly 70%, a breakthrough that had eluded the team for months. The room erupted in a mix of cheers and stunned silence. Even Dr. Kavanaugh looked impressed, though he quickly masked it with a gruff nod. Not bad, kid, he said. Not bad at all. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. He knew this was just the beginning. The challenges ahead would be even greater, but for the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. As he left the conference room that night, exhausted but exhilarated, he couldn't help but think about how far he had come and how far he still had to go. This was more than just a job. It was a calling, and he was ready to answer it. The next morning, Ethan walked into the Advanced Concepts Lab with a renewed sense of confidence. The simulation success the previous day had been a small victory, but he knew it wouldn't be enough to silence all the skeptics. Sure enough, as he took his seat at a workstation, the undercurrent of doubt among certain team members became evident. Dr. Kavanaugh stood at the front of the room, assigning tasks for the day. We'll be running follow-up tests on the cryostasis module, he said, his tone curt. And I'll expect full analyses from everyone by the end of the day. Ethan, you'll assist Dr. Patel with the thermal flux calculations. Ethan nodded, determined to prove his worth again. He turned to Dr. Patel, a brilliant but notoriously exacting physicist in her mid-30s. She offered a polite but perfunctory smile. Follow me, she said, leading him to a separate workstation. As they began working, it became clear that Dr. Patel was skeptical of Ethan's inclusion on the team. I'll admit, she said, not looking up from her screen, your idea yesterday was clever. But clever ideas aren't enough in this field. They need to stand up to rigorous scrutiny. Ethan bristled, but kept his tone measured. I understand that. I'm here to learn and contribute, not to prove anyone wrong. Dr. Patel glanced at him, her expression softening slightly. Good. Then let's see how well you handle the grunt work. For the next few hours, Ethan immersed himself in data analysis. The equations were complex, and the pressure to keep up with Patel's pace was immense. But as the morning progressed, Ethan found himself enjoying the challenge. The calculations began to make sense, and he even spotted a few inefficiencies in the thermal flux model that he pointed out to Patel. To his surprise, she acknowledged them with a nod. Not bad, she said. We'll make those adjustments. However, not everyone on the team was as open to collaboration. During lunch in the SpaceX cafeteria, Ethan overheard a group of engineers talking at a nearby table. Can you believe Musk brought in a kid? One of them said, shaking his head. This isn't a science fair. Another engineer laughed. Yeah, what's next? A spelling bee champ running propulsion tests? Ethan felt his face grow hot. He wanted to march over and confront them, but stopped himself. Instead, he clenched his fists under the table and focused on finishing his meal. He knew that the best way to silence them was to succeed. Later that afternoon, the team gathered to review the latest simulation results. Dr. Kavanaugh led the meeting, his critical eye scanning the data. "The cryostasis system is stabilizing," he said, his tone grudgingly approving. "But we're still losing efficiency at higher altitudes. Any suggestions?" Ethan raised his hand. "What if we adjusted the magnetic alignment to account for altitude changes? The atmospheric density might be affecting the system." Dr. Kavanaugh raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. And how exactly would you propose we model that?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, aware that all eyes were on him. "We could integrate an adaptive algorithm that adjusts the alignment parameters in real time based on altitude readings. It would require some coding, but it's feasible." One of the skeptical engineers scoffed. "Feasible? Do you even know how complex that algorithm would need to be? It's not as simple as memorizing pi, kid." The jab stung, but Ethan didn't let it show. Instead, he turned to Dr. Kavanaugh. "I can start working on a prototype. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else." Kavanaugh considered this for a moment before nodding. "Fine. Let's see what you can do." Over the next few days, Ethan threw himself into the project, often staying late into the night to refine the algorithm. He faced constant challenges, debugging errors, fine-tuning the parameters, and defending his ideas against a barrage of criticism. But with each obstacle, he grew more determined. One evening, as he was working alone in the lab, Musk appeared in the doorway. "Burning the midnight oil, huh?" Ethan looked up, startled but pleased. "Yeah, I want to make sure this algorithm is ready for testing tomorrow." Musk walked over and studied the code on Ethan's screen. "Looks like you're making progress," he said. "But remember, it's not just about the work. It's about how you handle the people around you." Ethan frowned. "Some of the team doesn't think I belong here." Musk chuckled. "Of course they don't. You're challenging their norms. But let me tell you something. Every innovator in this building faced the same resistance at some point. You just have to keep proving them wrong." Ethan nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Thanks, Mr. Musk." "Call me Elon," Musk said with a grin. "Now, get some rest. Tomorrow's another big day." The following morning, the team gathered for the algorithm test. Ethan presented his work with confidence, explaining how the adaptive alignment would function. As the simulation ran, the room watched in tense silence. When the results appeared, the efficiency levels had improved dramatically. The system was now stable even at higher altitudes. Dr. Kavanaugh leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said finally, "it seems you've earned your place here, Ethan." The room erupted in applause, though not everyone looked entirely pleased. Ethan caught the eye of one of the engineers who had mocked him earlier. The man gave a reluctant nod of approval, and Ethan felt a small but satisfying sense of vindication. As the meeting ended, Dr. Patel approached him. "Good work, Ethan," she said. "You're proving a lot of people wrong." Ethan smiled. "Thanks, but I still have a lot to learn." "Don't we all?" Patel replied, her tone surprisingly warm. For the first time, Ethan felt like he was truly part of the team. But he knew the journey was far from over. The challenges ahead would only get tougher, and he was ready for them. The success of Ethan's adaptive alignment algorithm was still the buzz at SpaceX headquarters. But for Ethan, the celebration was short-lived. He knew that in the world of innovation, each success was merely a stepping stone to the next challenge. And the next challenge came faster than anyone anticipated. The day began with a high-stakes test of the cryostasis module, now integrated with Ethan's algorithm. This was the first time the system would be tested under conditions simulating the extreme environments of space. A full-scale vacuum chamber had been prepared, mimicking the near-zero atmospheric pressure and frigid temperatures of the upper stratosphere. As the team assembled in the control room, Dr. Kavanaugh took the lead. "This is it," he said, addressing the group. "We'll see if the adjustments hold under pressure. Patel, monitor thermal readings. Ethan, you're on alignment adjustments if the system destabilizes. Everyone else, eyes on your stations." Ethan took his place at the console, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. His heart raced as the simulation began. At first, everything seemed to work perfectly. The cryostasis module maintained stable temperatures, and the alignment algorithm adapted seamlessly to the simulated altitude changes. The team watched in tense silence as the system endured conditions harsher than any test before. But then, without warning, alarms blared. Red warning lights flashed across multiple screens. Pressure breach detected. Patel called out, her voice sharp with urgency. The thermal shield is failing. Ethan's eyes darted to his console. The algorithm was struggling to keep up with the sudden fluctuations. He frantically typed commands, attempting to recalibrate the system in real time. It's not holding, he shouted, frustration creeping into his voice. The input parameters are spiking too fast. Dr. Kavanaugh leaned over Ethan's shoulder. Pull the algorithm offline if it can't stabilize. We need to isolate the failure point. Ethan hesitated, his hands frozen above the keyboard. Pulling the algorithm offline felt like admitting defeat, but he knew the stakes were too high to let pride get in the way. With a deep breath, he disabled the alignment program. The system stabilized momentarily, but it was clear that the cryostasis module had suffered significant damage. The test ended abruptly, with Kavanaugh ordering an immediate shutdown. The room fell into a tense silence as the team absorbed what had happened. Dr. Kavanaugh was the first to speak. Patel, I want a full report on the thermal shield failure by the end of the day, he said, his tone clipped. Then he turned to Ethan. And you? Review the algorithm. Find out why it couldn't adapt to the fluctuations. Ethan nodded, his stomach sinking. Yes, sir. As the team dispersed, Ethan lingered at his station, replaying the test data. He felt a heavy weight on his shoulders. This wasn't just a minor setback. It was a potential blow to his credibility. Later that evening, Ethan was still in the lab, poring over lines of code. He was so focused that he didn't notice Musk enter the room until he spoke. Rough day? Musk asked, leaning casually against a workstation. Ethan looked up, startled. You could say that, he replied, forcing a weak smile. Musk walked over and glanced at the screen. You know, when the Falcon 1 failed 3 times, a lot of people thought we'd never recover. Some of them even laughed at us. Ethan frowned. How did you handle it? Musk smirked. By not quitting. Failure is an option, Ethan. If you're not failing, you're not innovating. The key is to learn from it. Ethan nodded, his resolve strengthening. I don't want the team to think I don't belong here. Forget about what they think, Musk said firmly. Focus on the problem. Fix it, and they'll have no choice but to respect you. Ethan took a deep breath. Thanks, Elon. Musk clapped him on the shoulder. You've got this. Now, get some sleep. You can't solve problems on an empty tank. The next morning, Ethan was back in the lab, determined to find the flaw. He analyzed every line of code, cross-referenced the data from the test, and even consulted Patel for insights on the thermal shield dynamics. Hours turned into days as Ethan worked tirelessly. There were moments of frustration, but he refused to give up. He knew the algorithm had potential. It just needed refining. Finally, after countless iterations, he found the problem. A minor miscalculation in the algorithm's response curve. It had been too slow to adapt to rapid pressure changes. Ethan implemented a fix, adding a predictive component that would allow the system to anticipate fluctuations rather than react to them. The team gathered for another test, and Ethan's nerves were at an all-time high. As the simulation began, he watched anxiously, his fingers crossed under the console. This time, when the system encountered rapid fluctuations, the algorithm held steady. The predictive component kicked in, maintaining stability even under extreme conditions. When the test ended, the results were clear. The system was a success. Dr. Kavanaugh turned to Ethan, a rare smile breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. Well done, he said simply. Ethan allowed himself a small smile of relief. He had faced his first major setback and emerged stronger. But he knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with even greater challenges, and he was ready for them. With the cryostasis module test finally a success, Ethan's reputation at SpaceX soared. Dr. Kavanaugh assigned him a new, critical task, refining the navigation system for SpaceX's upcoming Mars mission. It was a high-profile project that required precision and innovation. Ethan, Kavanaugh said in his usual no-nonsense tone, this mission is critical for our future interplanetary goals. I need you to lead the team on this. Ethan's heart raced. This was a chance to prove himself on an even larger scale. "I won't let you down, sir." As he began working on the project, Ethan found himself surrounded by a team of engineers, programmers, and mathematicians, all experts in their fields. Among them was Alex Reyes, a brilliant aerospace engineer with years of experience at SpaceX. While most of the team welcomed Ethan's leadership, Alex seemed less than thrilled. "You're what, 15?" Alex asked one day during a meeting, his tone dripping with skepticism. "No offense, kid, but do you even know what you're doing? This isn't a science fair." The room went silent. Ethan felt the heat rise to his face, but kept his composure. "I understand your concerns, Alex," he replied evenly. "But the task isn't about age. It's about results. Let's focus on the data." Alex smirked but said nothing more. The tension, however, lingered in the air. As the days turned into weeks, the friction between Ethan and Alex grew. Ethan's approach was innovative and fast-paced, relying on his deep understanding of algorithms and predictive modeling. Alex, on the other hand, was more cautious, preferring tried-and-true methods over untested ideas. During a meeting to finalize the navigation system's framework, Ethan proposed using a quantum computing model to enhance the system's accuracy. "This will allow us to calculate orbital trajectories with near-zero margin of error," Ethan explained, pointing to the model on the screen. "It's cutting edge, and it can save us months of calculations." Alex crossed his arms, a skeptical look on his face. "Cutting edge is great, but reliable is better. Quantum computing is still experimental. If this fails, we're not just wasting months, we're risking the entire mission." Ethan held his ground. Space exploration is about taking calculated risks. If we don't push the boundaries, we'll never achieve anything groundbreaking. The debate went on for nearly an hour, with the rest of the team watching uneasily. Finally, Dr. Kavanaugh stepped in. "Enough," he said, his voice firm. "Ethan, you'll proceed with the quantum model, but I want contingency plans in place. Alex, I expect your full cooperation. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Alex said through gritted teeth. Despite the ongoing tension, the team began implementing Ethan's model. The work was grueling, requiring long hours and intense focus. Ethan often stayed late into the night, running simulations and tweaking the system. One evening, as Ethan was reviewing data, Alex walked into the lab. "Still here?" he asked, his tone less confrontational than usual. Ethan glanced up, surprised. "Yeah, just making sure the latest simulations are stable." Alex hesitated for a moment before pulling up a chair. "Look, I'll admit I was skeptical about you leading this project, but you've proven you're not just some kid with a lucky streak." Ethan blinked, unsure of how to respond. "Thanks, I guess." Alex chuckled. "Don't let it go to your head. You're still young, and you've got a lot to learn. But I can see you're serious about this." Ethan nodded. "I am, and I know I don't have all the answers. That's why I need the team, including you." Alex sighed. "Fair enough. Let's make this mission a success." It wasn't exactly a friendship, but it was a start. Ethan knew earning Alex's full respect would take time, but he was willing to put in the effort. By the end of the week, the team achieved a major milestone. The quantum computing model successfully completed its first full-scale simulation, calculating an orbital trajectory with unprecedented precision. Dr. Kavanaugh called a meeting to review the results. "This is exceptional work," he said, looking directly at Ethan. "You've set a new standard for what's possible." The room erupted in applause, but Ethan's focus was already on the next steps. He knew the real test would come when the system was used in a live mission. As the team celebrated, Alex approached Ethan. "Good job, kid," he said, extending a hand. "I mean it." Ethan shook his hand, a genuine smile on his face. "Thanks, Alex. Let's keep it going." But even as they enjoyed their success, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the biggest challenges were still ahead. He was right. The breakthrough with the quantum computing model brought an air of excitement and optimism to the SpaceX team. Ethan's calculations were flawless, and the navigation system seemed ready for integration into the Mars mission. However, as they prepared for a live simulation, a high-stakes test designed to mimic real-life conditions, an unease settled over the group. Ethan spent the morning reviewing the final parameters for the simulation. The team had worked tirelessly to ensure every variable was accounted for. But deep down, Ethan knew no system was immune to unforeseen complications. "Are you sure this is ready?" Alex asked, his tone carrying a mix of skepticism and caution. While his earlier animosity had softened, his wariness remained. "It has to be," Ethan replied, trying to project confidence. "We've accounted for every possible anomaly. Now it's time to see if the system can handle the real thing." The team gathered in the control room, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Dr. Kavanaugh stood at the head of the room, his usual stoic demeanor betraying a hint of tension. "Begin the simulation," he instructed. Ethan's heart pounded as the system came to life. On the large screen, a virtual spacecraft launched from Earth, its trajectory calculated in real time by the quantum model. The navigation system adjusted for gravitational pulls, asteroid fields, and orbital alignments with astonishing precision. "Everything's stable," Ethan reported, his eyes glued to the data feed. For the first 10 minutes, the simulation ran flawlessly. The spacecraft's trajectory was spot on, and the system's predictive adjustments were seamless. But then, without warning, an alert flashed across the screen. "Error in trajectory calculation," one of the engineers called out. "The system's predicting a collision course with an asteroid belt." Ethan's stomach dropped. "That's impossible," he muttered, quickly scanning the data. The asteroid belt was accounted for in the parameters. There shouldn't be any deviation. Dr. Kavanaugh stepped forward. "What's causing the error?" "It's a data corruption in the quantum model," Ethan explained, his voice tense. "The system's misinterpreting external inputs. We need to override it manually." As the room buzzed with panic, Ethan's mind raced. The simulation was designed to mimic real-world conditions, meaning a manual override wouldn't just reset the system. It could compromise the entire test. "We're running out of time," Alex shouted. "The spacecraft's trajectory is veering into the asteroid field. If we don't act now, the simulation will fail." Ethan clenched his fists, weighing his options. He could attempt a manual override, but it would require bypassing several safety protocols, something that had never been done before. Alternatively, he could let the system try to correct itself, but the odds of success were slim. "Ethan," Dr. Kavanaugh said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "this is your call." Taking a deep breath, Ethan made his decision. "Initiating manual override," he announced. The room fell silent as Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard, inputting a series of complex commands. The screen flickered as the system responded to his instructions, recalibrating the spacecraft's trajectory. "Come on," Ethan whispered under his breath. After a tense 30 seconds, the simulation stabilized. The spacecraft narrowly avoided the asteroid belt, its trajectory realigned with the original course. The room erupted in cheers and applause. As the adrenaline faded, Ethan slumped into his chair, exhausted but relieved. Dr. Kavanaugh approached him, a rare smile on his face. "Well done," he said. "That was quick thinking under pressure. You saved the simulation." Ethan managed a tired smile. "Thank you, sir. But we still need to figure out what caused the error." Alex stepped forward, a newfound respect in his eyes. "I'll admit, I didn't think you had it in you, but you proved me wrong. Nice work, kid." "Thanks, Alex," Ethan replied. "Now let's make sure this doesn't happen again." Over the next few days, Ethan and the team analyzed the simulation data to identify the source of the error. What they discovered was both alarming and fascinating. A rare quantum fluctuation had caused the data corruption. While the fluctuation was an anomaly, it highlighted a potential vulnerability in the system. "This isn't just a bug," Ethan explained during a team meeting. "It's a fundamental limitation of the quantum model. If we don't address it, it could happen again, maybe even during the actual mission." Dr. Kavanaugh nodded. "Then fix it. We can't afford any weaknesses." Ethan felt the weight of the responsibility, but he was determined to rise to the challenge. He knew that solving this problem would push the boundaries of what was possible in quantum computing and cement his place as a key player in the Mars mission. Ethan spent the next several days practically living at SpaceX's research lab, dissecting the quantum model and analyzing the anomaly that had nearly sabotaged the simulation. Despite the success of the manual override, the flaw in the system posed a grave threat to the Mars mission. It was not just a one-off error. It exposed an underlying vulnerability that could jeopardize the entire operation. Ethan's desk was covered in scribbled equations, stacks of reference materials, and a growing pile of empty coffee cups. His mind churned as he reviewed the data for the 100th time, looking for patterns, clues, anything that could explain the anomaly. On the third sleepless night, as the lab remained eerily quiet, inspiration struck. Ethan stared at the simulation logs, realizing he'd been approaching the problem from the wrong angle. The issue wasn't just with the quantum processor itself, it was how the system interpreted external environmental variables in real time. These fluctuations, they're not random, Ethan muttered, his eyes lighting up. He jumped to his feet and began sketching a diagram on the whiteboard. The quantum model isn't failing, it's overcompensating for a variable we didn't account for. Alex, who had been working late in the lab as well, noticed the commotion and wandered over. "What are you rambling about, kid?" "It's the solar particle streams," Ethan said, his voice brimming with excitement. "The system isn't just navigating through space, it's also adapting to fluctuations caused by high-energy particles from the sun. But the model wasn't calibrated to recognize those as noise. It treated them as critical inputs." Alex squinted at the equations. "You're saying the system was too smart for its own good?" "Exactly," Ethan replied. "It's like trying to navigate through static on a radio. You ignore the static, not treat it as the signal." The next morning, Ethan presented his findings to Dr. Kavanaugh and the rest of the engineering team. "The solution isn't to make the system smarter, it's to teach it what to ignore," Ethan explained, pointing to the revised equations on the whiteboard. "We need to create a filter, an algorithm that distinguishes between actionable data and background noise." Dr. Kavanaugh stroked his chin thoughtfully. "That's a bold proposition, Ethan, but do you think it'll work?" "It has to," Ethan said. "The alternative is leaving the system vulnerable to the same type of anomaly. This algorithm will reduce the processing load and improve reliability under extreme conditions." Alex chimed in, his earlier skepticism replaced by grudging respect. "It's risky, but the logic checks out. We should run some tests." Over the next week, the team worked around the clock to integrate Ethan's filtering algorithm into the navigation system. The process was fraught with challenges. The algorithm had to be both efficient and adaptable, capable of distinguishing between billions of data points in real time. Ethan led the charge, collaborating with Alex and the other engineers to refine the code. There were moments of frustration, lines of code that refused to behave, simulations that failed spectacularly, but the team pressed on. Slowly but surely, the system began to stabilize. Finally, the day arrived to test the updated system in a full-scale simulation. The entire team gathered in the control room, their nervous energy palpable. This time, the simulation wouldn't just mimic a standard Mars mission. It would include randomized anomalies designed to stress test the system to its limits. Starting simulation in 3, 2, 1, Dr. Kavanaugh announced. The virtual spacecraft launched into space, its trajectory calculated by the updated navigation system. For the first hour, everything proceeded smoothly. Then, as expected, the anomalies began. Sudden gravitational shifts, rogue asteroid clusters, and bursts of simulated solar radiation. Ethan held his breath as the system responded. The filtering algorithm kicked in, isolating the noise and recalibrating the spacecraft's course with precision. Data streamed across the monitors, showing a flawless trajectory. "It's working," Alex said, a hint of amazement in his voice. Ethan exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. "We did it." Just as the team began to celebrate, a new alert appeared on the screen. This time, it wasn't a simulated anomaly. It was an actual error in the hardware. "Power surge detected in the quantum processor," one of the engineers reported. "The system's overheating." Panic swept through the room as the simulation wavered. Ethan's mind raced. The filtering algorithm had stabilized the data, but the processor itself wasn't designed to handle the increased load over extended periods. "This isn't a software issue," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "It's a hardware limitation. We need to shut down the processor before it's permanently damaged." Dr. Kavanaugh hesitated. "If we abort now, we lose the simulation data." But if we push the system too far, I'll find a way to cool it, Ethan interrupted. But we need to act fast. With no time to waste, Ethan rushed to the hardware lab, where the quantum processor was housed. The processor's temperature was climbing rapidly, its cooling system struggling to keep up. Ethan grabbed a toolkit and began modifying the cooling unit, his hands moving with practiced precision. Come on, he muttered, tightening a valve and rerouting the coolant flow. The processor's temperature began to stabilize, but it was still dangerously high. Back in the control room, Alex monitored the simulation. The system's holding, but just barely. Ethan, whatever you're doing, make it quick. Ethan made one final adjustment, increasing the coolant pressure to maximum capacity. The processor's temperature dropped sharply, and the alert disappeared from the monitors. We're back online, Alex reported. The simulation's stable. As the simulation concluded, the team erupted in cheers. The spacecraft had completed its journey without a single navigational error, thanks to Ethan's algorithm and his quick thinking under pressure. Dr. Kavanaugh approached Ethan, his expression a mix of pride and relief. You saved the mission. Again. Ethan smiled, exhaustion evident in his eyes. It's a team effort, sir. Alex clapped him on the shoulder. You've earned your spot here, kid. No question about it. But even as the team celebrated, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the challenges were far from over. The Mars mission was one step closer to reality, but the stakes were higher than ever, and the journey was only just beginning. The afterglow of the successful simulation was short-lived. As the team packed up for the evening, the lab doors swung open, revealing a figure whose presence instantly shifted the room's atmosphere. Elon Musk himself stepped inside, his sharp gaze scanning the room before settling on Ethan. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then Elon strode forward, his expression unreadable. I hear we had a close call today, he said, his voice calm but laced with intensity. His eyes flicked toward Dr. Kavanaugh, who looked momentarily caught off guard. Yes, Mr. Musk, Kavanaugh said, stepping forward. The team handled it exceptionally well, and the system is now fully operational thanks to Ethan's algorithm and his quick thinking during the hardware search. Elon nodded slowly, his focus shifting back to Ethan. So, you're the one everyone's talking about. Ethan straightened, his pulse quickening. Yes, sir. I worked on the algorithm to stabilize the system, and nearly fried my quantum processor in the process, Elon said, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Ethan hesitated, unsure if the remark was meant as a rebuke or a joke. The processor was overheating due to the increased load, but we managed to bring it back online without any permanent damage. Elon's smirk grew. Relax, kid. I'm not here to grill you. In fact, I'm impressed. The tension in Ethan's shoulders eased slightly. Thank you, sir. Elon stepped closer, examining the diagrams and notes still scattered across Ethan's workstation. You solved a problem my best engineers have been struggling with for months. That's no small feat, but tell me, do you think your solution will hold up in the real world? Out there are no do-overs. Ethan met Elon's gaze, his voice steady despite the weight of the question. I believe it will, but we'll need to keep refining it. The anomalies in space are unpredictable, and there's always room for improvement. Elon nodded, his expression thoughtful. Good answer. Never settle for good enough. After a moment's pause, Elon turned to Dr. Kavanaugh. I want Ethan to lead the next phase of testing. If anyone can push this system to its limits, it's him. The room went silent again, the weight of Elon's words sinking in. Dr. Kavanaugh's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he nodded. Of course, Mr. Musk. Ethan has proven himself more than capable. Ethan's heart raced. Lead the next phase? The idea was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. I won't let you down, Ethan said, his voice firm despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Elon clapped a hand on his shoulder. I know you won't, and if you do, I'll be the first to tell you. Later that evening, after most of the team had gone home, Ethan found himself alone in the lab, reviewing the data from the simulation. The weight of Elon's words still lingered, and the responsibility he'd been given felt enormous. As he stared at the monitor, Alex appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Figured you'd still be here, he said, setting one down in front of Ethan. Ethan chuckled weakly. What gave it away? You've got that look, Alex said, sitting down across from him. The what have I gotten myself into look. Ethan sighed. It's just a lot. Elon Musk expects me to lead the next phase. What if I screw up? Alex leaned back, sipping his coffee. You won't. And even if you do, you'll figure it out. That's what makes you different. You don't give up, no matter how impossible things seem. Ethan glanced at Alex, surprised by the encouragement. Thanks. Don't mention it, Alex said, standing up. But seriously, get some rest. Even geniuses need sleep. The following morning, Elon called a meeting to outline the next phase of the project. The goal was simple in concept but daunting in execution. A live test using one of SpaceX's prototype spacecraft. The system would be tasked with navigating a simulated asteroid field and performing a series of complex maneuvers, challenges designed to push the algorithm and the hardware to their absolute limits. This isn't just about proving the system works, Elon said, addressing the team. It's about proving we can rely on it when lives are on the line. The stakes don't get higher than this. Ethan listened intently, the enormity of the task sinking in. This wasn't just a test, it was a trial by fire. Over the next few weeks, the lab became a hive of activity. Engineers fine-tuned the spacecraft, programmers optimized the code, and Ethan worked tirelessly to refine the algorithm. Each day brought new challenges, from unexpected bugs to hardware malfunctions, but the team pressed on. Ethan quickly found himself stepping into his new role as a leader. He delegated tasks, coordinated with different departments, and even mediated disputes between team members. It was exhausting but rewarding, and with each passing day, his confidence grew. Just as the team was nearing the final stages of preparation, disaster struck. During a routine diagnostic, the quantum processor failed completely, its circuits fried beyond repair. This can't be happening, Ethan muttered, staring at the smoking hardware. Dr. Kavanaugh shook his head grimly. We don't have time to replace it. The test is scheduled for tomorrow, and Elon isn't going to postpone it. Ethan's mind raced. Without the processor, the entire system was useless. They needed a solution, and fast. After a tense few minutes of silence, Ethan spoke up. What if we use the backup processor? Kavanaugh frowned. The backup isn't configured for this system. It's slower, less efficient. It won't be able to handle the algorithm. Not as it is now, Ethan admitted. But if we strip the algorithm down to its essentials, remove the non-critical functions, it might just work. Alex raised an eyebrow. You're talking about gutting the system. If this fails... It won't, Ethan said firmly. We don't have a choice. This is our only shot. The lab was a frenzy of activity as the countdown to the live test began. Ethan worked side by side with the team, stripping the algorithm down to its core functions while Alex and the engineers configured the backup processor. The clock seemed to tick faster with each passing second, and every minute felt like a race against the inevitable. Dr. Kavanaugh hovered nearby, barking orders and providing support where he could. Despite the chaos, everyone moved with purpose. They were a team united by a singular goal, proving to Elon Musk and the world that their work could revolutionize space travel. By the early hours of the morning, the system was ready. The stripped-down algorithm was loaded onto the backup processor, and the spacecraft sat prepped on the launch pad. The test would simulate a high-stakes scenario, navigating a dense asteroid field while performing evasive maneuvers and a final docking sequence, all without human intervention. Elon arrived at the control center just before the test began, his presence commanding but calm. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Ethan. You ready for this? Ethan nodded, though his palms were clammy. As ready as we'll ever be. Elon smirked. Good. Because there's no such thing as perfect conditions. Let's see what you've got. As the spacecraft roared to life and ascended into the atmosphere, the team held their breath. Inside the control room, monitors displayed live telemetry data and visual feeds from the onboard cameras. Ethan's stripped-down algorithm began to execute its commands, guiding the spacecraft toward the simulated asteroid field. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly. The spacecraft adjusted its trajectory with precision, weaving through the virtual obstacles. The backup processor, though slower, handled the calculations with surprising efficiency. Hope began to build in the room. But then, as the spacecraft approached the densest part of the field, the first anomaly appeared. Warning, trajectory deviation detected. The system announced, its robotic voice cutting through the tension. Ethan's heart sank as he scanned the data. The backup processor was struggling to keep up with the rapid influx of calculations, causing slight delays in response times. Those delays, in turn, were compounding the errors in the navigation system. "We're losing accuracy," Alex muttered, his eyes glued to the monitor. Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't afford to let the system fail now. What if we offload some of the calculations to the onboard systems? It'll reduce the load on the processor. That's risky, Kavanaugh said, frowning. The onboard systems weren't designed for this. We don't have a choice, Ethan said, already typing furiously at his terminal. Trust me. With seconds to spare, Ethan rerouted part of the algorithm to the spacecraft's onboard systems. The transition was seamless, and the system stabilized just in time to avoid a collision. A collective sigh of relief swept through the control room, but the challenge was far from over. As the spacecraft continued its journey, the final obstacle loomed. A high-speed docking maneuver with a simulated space station. This was the ultimate test of the algorithm's precision and adaptability. The spacecraft approached the docking bay, its thrusters firing in calculated bursts. Ethan's algorithm adjusted the trajectory in real time, compensating for microgravity and external forces. The entire room watched in silence, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Docking sequence initiated, the system announced. The spacecraft slowed as it aligned with the docking port. For a moment, it seemed as though everything was going perfectly. But then, an unexpected variable appeared. A sudden gust of solar wind that sent the spacecraft slightly off course. Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard as he manually adjusted the algorithm to account for the solar wind. The room erupted in frantic chatter as the spacecraft teetered on the brink of failure. "Come on," Ethan muttered under his breath, his eyes glued to the monitor. The algorithm recalibrated, firing the thrusters in a precise sequence. The spacecraft corrected its course, inching closer to the docking port. With one final burst of thrust, it locked into place. "Docking complete," the system announced. The room erupted in cheers, but Ethan barely heard them. He slumped back in his chair, the weight of the moment finally catching up with him. As the team celebrated, Elon approached Ethan, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing, simply studying the young programmer. Then, to Ethan's surprise, Elon extended his hand. "That was impressive. You didn't just solve problems, you anticipated them. That's what it takes to succeed in this business." Ethan shook his hand, a mix of exhaustion and pride washing over him. "Thank you, sir." Elon nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "This is just the beginning. Get ready, because the real challenges are still ahead." As the team celebrated late into the night, Ethan allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He had faced impossible odds and come out on top, but he knew this was only the start of his journey. The path ahead would be filled with even greater challenges, but for the first time, he felt ready to face them. Because in that moment, standing in the glow of the monitors and surrounded by his teammates, Ethan realized something profound. He wasn't just working on a project, he was building the future. The adrenaline from the successful test lingered in Ethan's veins as he sat in the control room hours later, watching the last team members trickle out. The lab was quiet now, the chaos of the day replaced by an eerie calm. Ethan leaned back in his chair, letting out a deep sigh of relief. But relief was short-lived. The following day, the lab buzzed with renewed energy. Media outlets were already covering the successful test, praising the team and the technology. Elon's social media post about the event had gone viral, highlighting Ethan's pivotal role. But with fame came pressure, and Ethan could feel its weight settling squarely on his shoulders. As he walked into the building, he noticed a shift in the way people looked at him. Some nodded in admiration, while others whispered behind his back. It was strange to suddenly be the center of attention in a room full of brilliant minds. "You're famous now," Alex teased as Ethan sat at his desk. "Don't let it go to your head." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Yeah, famous for almost crashing the test. If that solar wind had hit a second later, we'd be having a very different conversation. Stop downplaying it, Alex said, clapping him on the back. You saved the day. Own it. Ethan wanted to believe that, but a nagging doubt gnawed at the edges of his confidence. The stakes had been high, and while they'd succeeded, the test had exposed vulnerabilities in the system, vulnerabilities that he couldn't afford to ignore. Later that morning, the team gathered in the main conference room for a post-test debrief. Elon himself led the meeting, his commanding presence filling the space. You all did a phenomenal job, Elon began, pacing the room as he spoke. But success isn't just about celebrating the wins. It's about analyzing the failures and turning them into opportunities for growth. Ethan nodded, taking detailed notes as Elon outlined the next steps. They would be refining the algorithm to handle unforeseen variables like the solar wind, optimizing the backup processor, and preparing for an even more ambitious test in the coming months. Elon, Dr. Kavanaugh interjected, do you think we're ready for the next phase so soon? There's still a lot we need to address. That's exactly why we're pushing forward, Elon replied, his tone firm. Innovation doesn't wait. If we don't take risks, we'll never move the needle. Ethan felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He thrived under pressure, but the pace at which Elon wanted to operate was relentless. Could he keep up? By the afternoon, Ethan's inbox was flooded with emails. Some were congratulatory messages from colleagues and industry professionals, while others were invitations to speak at conferences or collaborate on projects. One email, in particular, caught his eye, an invitation from a prestigious think tank to join their advisory board. Alex glanced over Ethan's shoulder and whistled. Wow, you're in demand now. Ethan shook his head. It's just one test. I'm not some kind of prodigy. Tell that to the think tank, Alex joked. They clearly think you are. Ethan couldn't help but smile, but he also felt a pang of unease. The attention was flattering, but it came with expectations he wasn't sure he could meet. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan found himself working longer hours. The team's progress was impressive, but every breakthrough brought new challenges. The algorithm had to be faster, smarter, and more resilient. Elon's vision was clear. Nothing short of perfection would suffice. But perfection came at a cost. Ethan started skipping meals, losing sleep, and withdrawing from his friends and family. Even Alex, his closest confidant, noticed the change. Ethan, you need to take a break, Alex said one evening as they worked late in the lab. I can't, Ethan replied, not looking up from his screen. There's too much to do. You're burning out, Alex said, his voice tinged with concern. If you crash, the whole team suffers. Ethan didn't respond. He knew Alex was right, but the pressure to deliver was too great. Failure wasn't an option, not when so many people were counting on him. One evening, as Ethan pored over data in the empty lab, Elon walked in. He didn't say anything at first, simply watching Ethan work. You remind me of myself at your age, Elon said finally, breaking the silence. Ethan looked up, startled. I doubt that. I'm serious, Elon said, sitting across from him. The drive, the obsession with solving problems. It's what got me where I am today. But it's also what nearly destroyed me. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Elon leaned back, his expression thoughtful. When I was building SpaceX, there were times I thought I wouldn't make it. I pushed myself to the brink, thinking I had to carry everything on my own. But I learned that even the smartest people can't do it all. Ethan stared at him, the weight of Elon's words sinking in. So, what do I do? Trust your team, Elon said simply. You don't have to have all the answers. Focus on what you're good at, and let others fill in the gaps. That conversation stuck with Ethan as he left the lab that night. He realized he'd been so consumed by his work that he'd lost sight of the bigger picture. The project wasn't just about him. It was about the team, the vision, and the impact they could make together. The next day, Ethan made a conscious effort to delegate more tasks and take better care of himself. It wasn't easy, but he knew it was the only way to sustain his momentum. As the team prepared for their next big test, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just a cog in the machine. He was part of something much larger. And for the first time in weeks, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The days following Elon's conversation with Ethan had been a whirlwind of new ideas and strategies. The lab had shifted into high gear once again, but this time with a more balanced approach. Ethan felt more at ease, knowing he had his team's support and that the burden of perfection wasn't entirely on his shoulders. But despite this newfound clarity, the pressure was still mounting. The next phase of the test wasn't just about refining the system. They were venturing into uncharted territory. They would attempt to send a prototype into orbit using a new propulsion method, something no one had successfully achieved yet. The team met early one morning, the air in the conference room thick with anticipation. Elon stood at the front, his eyes glinting with determination. "We've done well, but we're entering a new frontier," Elon began, his tone serious. "This next test will be a game changer. It's not just about launching a prototype. It's about revolutionizing space travel as we know it." Ethan felt his heart race. They weren't just working on a project anymore. They were part of history in the making. "Ethan," Elon continued, turning toward him, "we need to be absolutely sure that the propulsion system will hold up under extreme conditions. You'll be overseeing the final calculations." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle in. "I'm on it," he said, voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. As the team worked around the clock to finalize the details, Ethan found himself consumed by the numbers. He double-checked the calculations, ran simulations, and tested scenarios. But with each passing hour, doubt crept in. What if they missed something crucial? What if the propulsion system failed during the test? One night, after everyone else had gone home, Ethan stayed in the lab, staring at his screens. He was alone, save for the hum of machines and the occasional flicker of the fluorescent lights overhead. "Ethan?" Startled, he looked up to see Alex standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Couldn't sleep?" Alex asked, walking over to hand him one of the cups. Ethan took it gratefully, though his mind was still racing. "I'm just not sure. What if something goes wrong?" Alex sat down beside him, leaning back in the chair. "You've done everything you can. You're the best person for this job, Ethan. You've got this." Ethan managed a small smile. "I hope so." As the day of the test approached, the atmosphere in the lab shifted from tense to electric. The media had started to show up, eager to cover the event, and the world was watching. Everything had to go perfectly. There was no room for error. The final test site was set up in a remote location, far away from prying eyes, though the tension in the air was palpable. Elon had flown in to oversee the launch, his eyes gleaming with excitement. The rest of the team was gathered around, their faces a mix of anticipation and nerves. "Let's do this," Elon said, turning to the group. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. He was just as anxious as anyone else. Ethan stood by the console, his fingers poised over the keyboard. The countdown began, and for a moment, everything seemed to move in slow motion. He could hear the beeping in his ears, the hum of the machines, and his own breath as he prepared for the test. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The moment the countdown hit 0, the rocket shot up into the sky, propelled by the new engine that Ethan's calculations had perfected. The crowd of onlookers held their breath, eyes glued to the screen, as the rocket ascended higher and higher. For a brief, terrifying moment, the rocket wavered. Too much torque, too much velocity. Ethan's heart stopped. Had they calculated it right? Was this going to be the moment everything fell apart? But then, the rocket steadied. It cut through the atmosphere like a knife through butter, the propulsion system holding up perfectly. Is it working?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ethan's eyes never left the screen. "It's working. We did it." Hours later, as the rocket reached its final trajectory and successfully entered orbit, the team gathered in the control room, their faces illuminated by the glow of their monitors. There was no celebration yet, just a collective exhale of relief. Ethan felt his legs go weak as the tension that had built up over the past few weeks melted away. They had done it. They had just changed the future of space travel. Elon came into the room, a rare smile on his face. "I told you we'd get there. This is just the beginning." Ethan smiled, still in shock at the magnitude of what had just happened. "It worked. We really did it." "Yes, we did," Elon said, clapping him on the shoulder. Now, let's get ready for what comes next. With the success of the propulsion test, a new chapter was beginning for Ethan and the team. They had just proven that their technology could work under real-world conditions. The possibilities seemed endless, and Ethan could see the excitement in his team's eyes as they began discussing the next steps. But even with the victory, there was no time for rest. The pace was only going to accelerate from here. More challenges, more obstacles, and more groundbreaking work awaited them. They were on the cusp of something extraordinary, and Ethan couldn't help but feel that this was just the first step of many. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave the control room, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The future was bright, and he was ready to tackle whatever came next. The excitement from the successful propulsion test had barely settled when the next phase of the mission took center stage. The media buzzed with reports, the world was watching, and the pressure was mounting. But amidst all the noise, Ethan felt a deeper sense of responsibility. This wasn't just another test. It was the tipping point for the future of space exploration. Every decision from here on out would be pivotal. As the team began preparations for the next step, Elon called a meeting to discuss the mission's future. The room was filled with the usual mix of engineers, scientists, and strategists, all eager to get down to business. But there was a noticeable change in the air, a sense of urgency that had never been there before. "We've proven that the propulsion system works," Elon started, his tone steady but filled with intensity. "Now, we move on to the next phase, the manned mission." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. A manned mission was a whole different ballgame. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about human lives. Ethan sat up straighter. This was the moment that would define everything. "The crew has been selected," Elon continued, flipping through a stack of papers. "And the launch window is in 6 months." The room fell silent. A manned mission to orbit, with a new propulsion system never before tested on humans. Ethan could see the trepidation in his colleagues' faces. There were so many unknowns, so many risks. "Ethan," Elon said, pulling him from his thoughts, "we need your final calculations. Everything must be flawless." Ethan nodded, a sense of purpose flooding his veins. There was no room for mistakes now. This was more than just a test. It was the culmination of everything they had worked toward. In the weeks that followed, Ethan threw himself into the calculations. The team had worked tirelessly to perfect the propulsion system, but now they were dealing with entirely new variables. What would happen if the fuel mixture was slightly off? Could the craft withstand the incredible stress of a full launch, especially with human passengers aboard? The new propulsion system was designed to be more efficient and less reliant on traditional fuel sources, but that came with its own set of challenges. The higher efficiency meant that the engine was capable of much higher speeds, but it also generated unpredictable forces. Ethan ran simulations for days on end, testing every possible scenario. Each time, the numbers didn't lie. The system was capable of incredible things, but it was also unpredictable. And the more Ethan analyzed, the more he realized how close they were to crossing a line that hadn't been crossed before. Late one night, after everyone had gone home, Ethan stayed at the lab, staring at the screen in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot from the hours of analysis, but his mind was still sharp. The calculations showed something troubling. There was a narrow window in which the system was stable, but if they pushed it too far, just a little too far, the craft would not survive. "Come on, think. Think, Ethan," he muttered to himself, running the numbers again. But the results were the same. Was it worth the risk? They had come so far, but were they truly ready for what came next? The next morning, Ethan stood in front of Elon in the control room, the weight of his findings pressing down on him. "Elon," Ethan began, his voice tense, "I need to talk to you about something." Elon looked up from his tablet, his expression unreadable. "What's going on?" Ethan hesitated, then laid out the numbers. "I've been running simulations on the manned mission, and there's something I'm concerned about. The propulsion system is capable of incredible things, but if we push it too hard, too fast, we could risk a catastrophic failure. I think we need to adjust the parameters." Elon interrupted him, raising a hand. "I'm listening, Ethan. What do you suggest?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I think we need to scale back the speed and focus on the stability. The crew's safety is paramount, and I believe we can still achieve our objectives without pushing the system to its absolute limits. Elon was silent for a moment, his gaze unwavering. How much of a setback are we talking about? A couple of weeks, maybe a month, Ethan replied. But it will give us a much higher probability of success. Elon leaned back in his chair, considering the words carefully. Then, without missing a beat, he nodded. Do it, Elon said, his voice firm. We're not in this to just take risks, we're in it to succeed. Ethan felt a rush of relief. Elon's trust meant everything, and with his blessing, the team could proceed with a more calculated approach. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Ethan and his team worked tirelessly to refine the system, adjusting parameters, running simulations, and making crucial tweaks to ensure everything would work flawlessly. The pressure was immense, but each small victory kept them moving forward. Meanwhile, Elon worked behind the scenes to secure the funding and support needed for the manned mission. He pushed harder than ever, making sure everything was in place for the historic launch. As the launch window approached, the team gathered for a final briefing. The air was thick with anticipation, but also with a sense of camaraderie. They had been through so much together, and now, they were about to take the next giant leap. This is it, Elon said, standing at the front of the room. We're about to change the future of space exploration. Let's make history. The day of the launch arrived. The rocket, gleaming in the morning sun, stood ready on the launch pad. The crew was preparing for their mission, with each member focused and determined. Ethan stood among the team, watching the final preparations unfold. He felt a sense of calm wash over him. They had done everything they could. The numbers were solid. The systems were ready. It was time. The final moments before the launch were nothing short of surreal. Ethan stood by the observation window, watching as the team made last-minute adjustments. The giant rocket, poised on the launch pad, felt like a living, breathing entity. Its steel frame gleaming in the early morning sunlight, its engines humming softly, waiting to roar into life. The excitement in the air was palpable. Every member of the team had played a part in getting to this moment. They had overcome obstacles, solved problems, and worked countless hours to reach this pinnacle of human achievement. But now, they were facing the unknown. No one could say with absolute certainty what would happen when the rocket ignited and soared into space. Inside the control room, Elon and the rest of the team gathered for the final briefing. The countdown had officially started, and there was no turning back. We've been through this 1,000 times in simulations, Elon said, his voice steady but with a glimmer of emotion that was rare for him. This is the culmination of years of hard work. The success of this mission will redefine space travel. But above all, we're doing this for the future of humanity. The first human space mission with our new propulsion system will change the way we look at the universe. The crew nodded, each person aware of the immense responsibility they carried. Ethan locked eyes with Elon. The gravity of the moment was undeniable, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling at the back of his mind. Was everything really as flawless as it seemed? 10 minutes to launch, the voice of the mission commander echoed through the room, pulling everyone back to reality. The tension in the air thickened as the countdown continued. Ethan sat at his station, fingers flying over his keyboard, running through final checks, making sure every number aligned. His mind raced through the potential risks, the variables that could shift, the unexpected forces that could come into play. He had done everything he could to ensure the mission's success, but now it was out of his hands. Outside, the rocket's engines began to power up, filling the air with a low hum that vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. 5 minutes, the commander's voice called out. Elon stood at the front of the room, his arms crossed, his expression unwavering. We've prepared for this. We know what needs to happen. Ethan nodded, trying to steady his nerves. He had made his calculations, had pushed the limits of the system, and had done everything to ensure that the crew's safety would be the top priority. But still, a sliver of doubt lingered. Was it enough? 3 minutes, came the countdown. The engines roared to life as the rocket began to tilt, aiming toward the sky. The ground beneath Ethan's feet seemed to tremble. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. The propulsion system, the design, the technology, everything was about to be tested at the highest level. Ethan's fingers hovered over the console, ready to monitor every detail as the rocket began its ascent. 2 minutes, the countdown continued, and the noise from the rocket's engines grew louder. Outside, the rocket's exhaust began to ignite, sending a column of fire and smoke into the sky. The crew inside the rocket prepared for the G-forces they would soon experience, strapping themselves in, mentally bracing for the most intense journey of their lives. Ethan watched the numbers tick down, feeling the anticipation build. 30 seconds, the commander said, and then silence fell. The whole room, every person, held their breath. In those final seconds, it felt as if time itself had slowed. Ethan's eyes were glued to the screens. He could see the rocket in real time, tracking its progress as it prepared to break free of Earth's gravity. 10, 9, 8, 7. The world held its breath. 6, 5. And then, boom. The rocket shot up into the sky, the engines roaring, lifting the craft into the heavens. The ground beneath Ethan's feet rumbled with the force of the ignition, and the control room erupted in a collective cheer. The rocket rose higher and higher, cutting through the atmosphere, leaving a trail of smoke and fire behind. Ethan couldn't help but smile, a rush of pride and excitement flooding through him. It was working. The propulsion system was holding up. As the rocket ascended into the higher layers of the atmosphere, everything seemed to be going according to plan. The initial stress tests, the extreme forces of launch, everything had passed. Ethan checked the data coming in from the rocket sensors, seeing nothing but green lights. But then, something unexpected occurred. A slight but unmistakable shift in the fuel ratio appeared on his screen. The numbers didn't match up with what they had predicted. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Elon," Ethan called out, voice urgent. "We've got an anomaly. The fuel mixture, something's not right." Elon turned swiftly, his expression hardening. "What kind of anomaly?" "It's minor, but it could grow," Ethan explained. "If we don't correct it now, we could have a fuel efficiency issue later in the mission." Elon's eyes narrowed. "Can we fix it remotely?" Ethan nodded, fingers flying across the console. "I think so, but we need to act quickly." As the rocket continued its journey into orbit, Ethan worked feverishly, recalibrating the systems and adjusting the fuel levels remotely. The team watched in tense silence as the data began to stabilize. It was touch and go for a few minutes, but then, the numbers began to align once more. "There. We've stabilized the mixture," Ethan said, letting out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Elon gave him a nod of approval. "Well done. Let's keep our focus." The rocket was now well into space, its trajectory accurate, and the propulsion system running smoothly once again. As the rocket broke free from Earth's atmosphere and the curvature of the planet became visible from the crew's vantage point, there was a profound silence in the control room. It was as though the whole world was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. They had done it. The first manned mission powered by the new propulsion system was well on its way. The mission wasn't over, but this was a monumental step forward. Ethan looked out the window, his eyes focused on the tiny blue planet far below. For the first time in his life, he truly understood the enormity of what they had just accomplished. This was only the beginning. The roar of the rocket's engines had faded into the distance, replaced by the serene hum of the spacecraft's life support systems. The vastness of space sprawled before them, dark, silent, and infinite. Ethan leaned back in his seat, allowing himself a rare moment of respite. The anomaly had been fixed, the mission was back on track, and they were now entering orbit. The first phase of the journey had been a success. But even as he felt a sense of relief, the mission's true challenge was just beginning. As the crew settled into the routine of their new environment, floating weightlessly in the cabin, they began to prepare for the next phase, testing the propulsion system at full capacity, a task that had never been attempted before. This was uncharted territory. The data collected during this stage would be vital for understanding whether their new technology could revolutionize space travel, or if it was still too risky for human use. Elon stood at the front of the cabin, staring at the Earth below, his thoughts unreadable. Ethan walked over to join him, the calm in Elon's demeanor giving him pause. "This is it, isn't it?" Ethan said quietly, unable to hide the awe in his voice. The future of space travel. And it's happening right now. Elon's gaze remained fixed on the planet. It's just the beginning. But yes, we're on the edge of something that could change everything. If we can make this work, we might be able to reach places we never thought possible. Mars, other stars, the entire universe. Ethan could feel the weight of those words. The ambition that had driven Elon, that had driven all of them, had led to this moment. But with that ambition came risk. They were venturing into the unknown, and not everything would go according to plan. Without warning, the ship gave a sudden, violent jolt, throwing Ethan and the others against their harnesses. The cabin lights flickered, and the walls of the ship trembled with a force that sent an icy shiver down Ethan's spine. What was that? Elon demanded, his voice sharp with concern. Ethan scrambled to the controls, his fingers flying over the touchscreen as he scanned the data. We've lost communication with the propulsion system. There's a power surge. It's coming from the engine. The room fell silent as Elon stepped forward, eyes narrowed in concentration. How bad is it? Bad enough that it's going to affect the trajectory, Ethan said, his mind racing. If we don't correct it immediately, we might drift off course. We could miss the entire orbital path. The crew exchanged tense glances. Every minute they stayed in orbit was another minute closer to running out of fuel, to being unable to return to Earth. And there was no way they could get a rescue mission out here in time. Ethan quickly pulled up the diagnostics, his thoughts a whirlwind of calculations. We need to reroute power from the backup systems. If we can stabilize the flow long enough to get a lock on the propulsion, we might be able to regain control. The countdown had started. Every second mattered now. Ethan's hands shook as he reworked the systems, rerouting power from auxiliary sources, each adjustment bringing them closer to resolving the issue. Elon, ever the optimist, kept his cool. We've planned for every contingency. Just stay focused. But as the minutes ticked by, the power surged again, more violently this time. The ship veered off course, sending a shockwave through the crew. The walls groaned, and a series of alarms blared, flashing warnings in bold red letters. We're losing altitude. One of the crew members shouted. Get us back on course. Elon barked, his voice sharp with urgency. Ethan's pulse raced as he worked furiously, his mind calculating every move. Just a little more. Almost there. He could feel the pressure mounting with every passing second. If he couldn't regain control soon, they would spiral off into the void. There would be no return. With a final, decisive input, Ethan hit the key to reroute the power flow. The system hummed and then stabilized. The ship's descent slowed. The alarms died down one by one as the propulsion system was re-engaged. We've got it, Ethan said, his voice a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Elon exhaled, his tension melting away. Well done, Ethan. That was close. The crew erupted into quiet applause, but there was no time to celebrate. Their trajectory was still slightly off, and the risk of the system failing again was very real. They had a brief window to adjust, but that meant they had to act now. With the ship's systems back under control, the crew moved quickly into position for their return journey. Ethan monitored the propulsion system as they began their descent, a part of him still unable to fully grasp the fact that they had made it this far. They had pushed the limits of human achievement, but they had come close to losing it all. The new propulsion system was capable of extraordinary things, but it was still untested, unpredictable. As the spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, the exterior of the ship heated up, and the G-forces began to press against their bodies. The crew braced themselves for the rough re-entry. Brace for impact, Elon ordered. His voice calm despite the turbulence. The cabin shook violently as the ship pierced the atmosphere, and for a few heart-stopping moments, it felt as if they might not make it. But then, as if the universe had decided to give them a break, the ship stabilized. The descent became smoother, and the flashing lights of the control room softened into the peaceful glow of the horizon below. With one final jolt, the spacecraft touched down, the roar of the engines cutting off as the ship settled onto the landing pad. A wave of relief swept through the crew, and Ethan let out a long breath. They had done it. They had successfully tested the new propulsion system and returned to Earth. But in the back of his mind, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The mission had been a success, but the future of space exploration depended on them continuing to push forward, to improve, to innovate. "Congratulations, everyone," Elon said, his voice full of pride. "We've just made history." Ethan looked out over the horizon, the blue sky now stretching out before them. "This is just the beginning," he murmured, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. The days following their return from space were filled with debriefings, media coverage, and endless congratulations. The mission had been a groundbreaking success, and the world was watching, eager to see what came next. But for Elon, Ethan, and the rest of the crew, the excitement was tempered by the understanding that this was just the beginning. They had proven the concept, but the future held greater challenges. There was still much to learn, and their journey into the unknown was far from over. Elon stood at the head of the conference table, his usual calm demeanor masking the intensity in his eyes. The team gathered around, their faces filled with anticipation. The new propulsion system was revolutionary, but there were still kinks to work out, and the next mission would push their technology even further. "We've accomplished something monumental, but now we need to build on it," Elon began. "The next step is clear. We need to go beyond Earth's orbit, beyond our solar system." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Going beyond the solar system was a bold statement, one that carried enormous risks. The technology was new, untested at such distances. But Elon wasn't one to shy away from the impossible. "I know this sounds crazy," Elon continued, "but if we can make it to the edge of the solar system, we can begin to understand what lies beyond. The potential for interstellar travel is closer than we think. We're on the brink of something extraordinary." Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What's the plan?" "We're going to send a probe," Elon said, "a probe capable of traveling beyond the outer limits of the solar system. We'll test our propulsion system under real interstellar conditions. And this time, we won't be coming back until we've completed our mission." The weight of those words hung in the air. A probe. It sounded simple enough, but the implications were enormous. The mission would take years, if not decades, and it would be the first of its kind. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. The team worked tirelessly to finalize the designs for the interstellar probe. Every aspect of the mission needed to be accounted for, from the ship's shielding to the power systems, to the data storage and communications that would ensure the probe could survive in the harshest of environments. Ethan was deeply involved in the technical aspects of the project, his mind racing with the possibilities. The challenge was immense. This was uncharted territory. There were so many unknowns, so many risks. But that was what made it exciting. This was the kind of frontier that people would only read about in science fiction novels. As the days turned into months, the probe began to take shape. It was sleek, streamlined, and packed with state-of-the-art technology. The propulsion system had been upgraded, refined, and was now capable of reaching speeds that were previously unimaginable. The probe would be the first vehicle to travel beyond the solar system, a feat that had eluded humanity for millennia. And yet, despite the incredible progress they were making, there was still one looming question that no one could answer. Would the probe survive the journey? The day of the launch arrived, and the excitement was palpable. The world watched as the sleek interstellar probe sat on the launch pad, ready to begin its journey into the unknown. Elon, Ethan, and the rest of the team stood on the observation deck, their eyes fixed on the probe as it towered over them. "This is it," Elon said, his voice steady but filled with an unmistakable sense of pride. "We're about to make history." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. They had come so far, but the real test was just beginning. They had no guarantees, no assurances. They were venturing into a vast, empty expanse where no one had gone before. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. With a final countdown, the rocket's engines roared to life, sending the probe soaring into the sky. The earth beneath them trembled as the vehicle ascended, breaking free from the pull of gravity and shooting into the cosmos. The probe's first stage was flawless, but the real test would come when it reached the outer edges of the solar system. There, the propulsion system would be pushed to its limits, and the probe's systems would be tested in ways no one had ever anticipated. As the probe ventured farther from Earth, the signals began to grow weaker. The communication link was still intact, but the distance was increasing, and the signal began to degrade. The team worked tirelessly to maintain contact, but the reality of interstellar travel began to set in. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And then, one day, the signal vanished entirely. The probe had reached the outer limits of the solar system, and beyond that, there was no communication, no data. The mission had entered a silent, vast, and unforgiving realm of space. Despite the overwhelming silence, the team didn't give up. They continued to monitor the probe's trajectory, hoping for some sign of life, some fragment of data that would confirm it had survived. And after months of waiting, a breakthrough came. A faint signal, a whisper from the probe, was detected, barely perceptible, but enough to give them hope. The team jumped into action, re-establishing the communication link, adjusting the instruments, and collecting every scrap of data the probe had transmitted. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The probe had survived the harsh conditions of space. It had reached the outer limits of the solar system and was now pushing beyond. And that was just the beginning. As the team analyzed the data, Elon stood in front of the screen, a look of awe in his eyes. The probe had done what no human had ever done before. It had crossed into the unknown, and it had sent back proof that interstellar travel was not just a dream. It was a reality. "The future is here," Elon said quietly. "This is only the beginning. We've shown that it's possible. Now, the real adventure begins." Ethan looked up at the stars, his mind racing with the possibilities. They had crossed a line that no one had dared cross before. And now, they were ready to go further. Into the stars. Into the unknown. The future of humanity was no longer limited to Earth. The universe was within their reach. The news of the probe's success rippled through the scientific community like a tidal wave. For the first time in history, humanity had reached the outer limits of the solar system, sending back data from the farthest reaches of space. The excitement was palpable, and Elon, Ethan, and the rest of the crew knew that the world was watching, waiting for the next chapter in the adventure. But as the weeks passed, the reality of what lay ahead began to set in. The probe had crossed a threshold, but the true test was yet to come. The farther they ventured, the more dangerous the journey would become. The unknowns were multiplying. The risks were enormous. Yet, for those who had always dreamed of exploring the stars, there was no turning back now. Elon sat in his office, staring at a screen filled with data. The initial results from the probe were astonishing, but they raised more questions than answers. The farther the probe traveled, the more they discovered about the nature of space itself. But what they were seeing didn't fit any model they had ever built. "There's something out there," Elon muttered to himself. "Something we didn't anticipate." Ethan walked in, his face serious. "What did you find?" Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "We've always assumed that space is a relatively constant vacuum, right? But the data from the probe suggests otherwise. There are fluctuations in the cosmic radiation, variations in the gravitational fields. It's as if space itself is alive." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Alive? You mean like it's changing?" Elon nodded. "Exactly. Something is happening out there, something we can't yet explain. It's like we are on the edge of a cosmic boundary, a threshold that, once crossed, could change everything." The uncertainty of what lay ahead was both exhilarating and terrifying. But there was no turning back now. They had committed to this journey, and they would see it through, no matter the cost. As the probe continued its journey, Elon and the team worked tirelessly to decode the mysterious signals. The fluctuations in space were growing more pronounced, and with each passing day, the unknown grew larger. The closer they got to the edge of the solar system, the less they understood what was happening. Ethan spent hours on the communication systems, trying to stabilize the link with the probe. It was becoming more difficult to maintain contact. The further the probe traveled, the more unstable the signal became. Yet, there were moments of clarity, moments when the data they received painted a picture of something truly extraordinary. And then, one day, everything changed. The team was gathered in the mission control room, anxiously watching the monitors. The signal had gone silent once again, but this time, something felt different. There was a feeling in the air, a strange tension that no one could shake. Without warning, a blip appeared on the screen, a small, fleeting signal. At first, it was so faint that they almost missed it. But then, the signal grew stronger, and with it, a sense of urgency filled the room. "It's coming from the probe," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "It's coming from beyond the edge of the solar system." Elon's heart raced as he watched the data roll in. The probe had passed beyond the point where they expected it to lose contact, but it had sent back a new kind of data, one that didn't match anything they had encountered before. "Is this real?" Ethan asked, staring at the data. "What is this? What are we looking at?" Elon didn't know how to respond. The data was bizarre. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They had crossed into a region of space where the normal laws of physics seemed to break down. "This is it," Elon said, his voice quiet with awe. "This is what we've been searching for. A whole new realm of space." As the weeks went by, the mystery deepened. The data from the probe became more fragmented, and the fluctuations in space grew more intense. It was as if they were approaching a cosmic event, something on the scale of a black hole or a supernova. But the anomaly was not like anything they had studied before. "We've crossed into a region of space that doesn't obey the rules," Elon said during a team briefing. "This is a new frontier, a place where our understanding of physics, of space and time, is meaningless." The discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The implications were profound. If what the probe was experiencing was real, then they had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary, a cosmic boundary, a threshold between known space and the unknown. But the excitement was tempered with fear. The further they pushed, the more dangerous the journey became. They were on the edge of the abyss, peering into the depths of a mystery that could change everything. As Elon stood on the observation deck, staring out at the vast expanse of space, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental. They had reached the edge of human knowledge, but beyond that lay an unfathomable mystery. Ethan joined him, his eyes fixed on the stars. "Do you think we're ready for this? I mean, what if we're not prepared for what's out there?" Elon looked at Ethan, his gaze unwavering. "We'll never be prepared for everything. That's the nature of exploration. The unknown is always waiting for us, and we have to face it head-on, no matter the risks." The team had made it this far, and there was no turning back now. The probe was their ticket into a new world, one that no human had ever seen before. What they would find, they couldn't yet say. But one thing was certain: the future of humanity was no longer limited to Earth. The team was gathered in the mission control room once again. The buzz of excitement in the air was palpable, but so was a growing sense of unease. They were on the verge of something groundbreaking, yet no one could predict the consequences. Every second, the mystery of what lay beyond the solar system deepened, pulling them further into the unknown. Elon paced in front of the screens, his mind racing. The probe had sent back another set of data, more cryptic and bizarre than ever before. It was almost as if the universe was trying to tell them something, but the message was fragmented, unintelligible to anyone who didn't have the patience to see it. "We've reached the event horizon," Elon muttered to himself, staring at the readouts. "But this isn't a black hole. It's something else, something we can't comprehend yet." Ethan, standing by his side, squinted at the data. "Whatever it is, it's like it's rejecting our understanding. Nothing fits, no formula, no law of physics. It's like we've crossed into a place where none of our rules matter." Elon paused, turning to face Ethan. "That's exactly it. We don't have the answers anymore. We're no longer exploring a world we understand. We're pioneers on the edge of the universe, in the land of the incomprehensible." In the days that followed, the data continued to pour in, increasingly erratic and fragmented. The probe was reaching farther into the unknown, transmitting signals that defied explanation. The fluctuations in space-time had escalated, and the team was left grappling with the fear that they might be in over their heads. The probe's communication began to break down. The signal became intermittent, and each transmission seemed more garbled than the last. Still, there were moments of clarity, strange bursts of information that seemed to hint at something profound, but they couldn't decipher the meaning. "We need to make a decision," Ethan said one evening, his voice heavy. "The more we push the probe, the worse the data gets. Are we risking everything for something we might never understand?" Elon turned away from the screen, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and fear. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Could they truly handle whatever they were about to uncover? Were they ready to face the mysteries of the universe? The answers, it seemed, were just out of reach. It was late in the evening when the signal came through, stronger than before, but still shrouded in layers of distortion. The transmission was coming from the probe, but this time, it wasn't just fragmented data. This was something else, something far more intelligent. The team gathered quickly, their faces illuminated by the glow of the monitors. Ethan worked feverishly to stabilize the signal. This is different," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. Elon's heart raced as he watched the screen. The data, though still distorted, appeared to contain a pattern, a series of shapes, symbols, like a code. "Is this a message?" Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "It's not just data. It's an attempt at communication. Something is reaching out to us." As the minutes ticked by, the symbols on the screen became more coherent. They began to align in ways that made sense. A pattern emerged, an intricate sequence that, when deciphered, revealed something no one could have anticipated. The symbols began to form words, a language that none of them recognized but that seemed undeniably familiar. And then, in a flash, the meaning became clear. The message was simple, yet profound. "The threshold is near. You are not alone." The room fell silent. No one moved. The weight of the message hung in the air, heavier than any of the team could bear. "What does it mean?" Ethan asked, his voice hushed. Elon stared at the screen, his mind racing. "It means that we've crossed into a new realm, one where we're no longer just explorers, we're being watched." The implications of the message were staggering. They had been expecting to encounter the unknown, but this was something entirely different. Someone, or something, had been watching them all along. The team had barely processed the shock of the message when something even more extraordinary happened. The probe, which had been slowly losing contact, suddenly sent a final burst of data, a vivid, high-resolution image of what lay beyond the boundary they had crossed. The image, though incomplete and grainy, showed a vast structure. It was like nothing any of them had ever seen. An enormous, alien construct hovering in the void, surrounded by a swirling cloud of cosmic energy. It was an artifact, as large as a planet, yet far more advanced than anything humanity could dream of. "Is this real?" Ethan breathed. What are we looking at?" Elon's mind raced, his heart pounding in his chest. "This is it. This is the discovery we've been waiting for. But it's not just about us anymore. There are others out there, and they've been waiting for us to find them." With the new revelation came a new set of challenges. The team had uncovered a message, yes, but what did it mean for humanity? The revelation that they weren't alone in the universe opened up a universe of possibilities and dangers. There was now a choice to be made. Would they push further into this strange new frontier, risking everything to uncover the secrets it held? Or would they retreat, knowing that the knowledge they sought could change the course of history forever? Elon stood in the center of the room, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. He could feel the eyes of the team on him. The future of humanity hung in the balance. "We've come this far," Elon said, his voice filled with a mix of determination and awe. "We're not turning back now." But even as he spoke, there was a sense that the true challenge had only just begun. The decision was made. Elon Musk and his team, standing at the precipice of the unknown, had chosen to push forward into the depths of the universe. The signals they had intercepted, the cryptic message from an unknown intelligence, and the image of the alien structure. Each of these clues pointed to a future that was both thrilling and terrifying. The next steps would either unlock the greatest discoveries humanity had ever known or reveal the dangers that lay beyond the stars. The next few days were a blur of activity. Elon's SpaceX team was already designing a new spacecraft, a vessel powerful enough to navigate the vast, unknown void that lay between them and the mysterious alien structure. The probe, having sent its final message, was no longer an option. The team needed to go directly to the source. "We need to be ready for anything," Elon said, his voice firm as he stood in the command center, surrounded by engineers, scientists, and experts from across the globe. "This is not just a mission to explore. This is a mission to make contact with someone, who is light years beyond us." Ethan, the lead scientist, looked up from the calculations on his screen. "We've never encountered anything like this before. The technology we're building can handle the journey, but we have no idea what we'll face once we reach that structure. The data we received is barely even a hint of what's to come." Elon nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I know, but we've always pushed the boundaries. And now we have a chance to do something no one has ever done before. Make contact with another civilization." It wasn't long before the spacecraft, the Odyssey, was ready. It was a masterpiece of engineering, sleek, powerful, and equipped with all the technology necessary to survive the harshest conditions in deep space. The crew was handpicked from the brightest minds in the world, each one prepared to embark on this historic journey. As the Odyssey prepared for takeoff, Elon stood outside the launch bay, gazing at the ship. The weight of the mission was almost too much to bear. What if they failed? What if they were making a mistake? But then, as he watched the sun rise over the launch pad, something shifted inside him. This was bigger than any of them. Humanity had always dreamed of reaching the stars, and now that dream was within their grasp. "We're doing this for everyone," Elon muttered to himself. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The Odyssey shot into the sky, leaving Earth behind. The first few days were filled with routine checks and fine-tuning of the spacecraft systems. As the crew ventured deeper into space, they passed through familiar sectors of the universe, but each day brought them closer to the unknown. The message from the alien structure had been clear, but it had also been vague. The warning, "The threshold is near. You are not alone." They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led to something much more significant. But what exactly? Elon sat alone in the observation deck, watching the stars drift by. The vastness of space seemed endless, and yet, he couldn't help but feel that the vastness was watching them, waiting for them to arrive. Ethan joined him, a grim expression on his face. "Elon, we're getting closer. The signal we've been tracking, it's stronger now. Whatever it is, it's reacting to our presence." Elon turned to him. "You think they know we're coming?" "I don't know," Ethan replied, "but I think they're expecting us." As they approached the edge of the unknown, something strange began to happen. The stars around them, which had seemed so distant and cold, started to behave differently. They blinked and flickered, as if they were responding to something in their vicinity. It was subtle at first, a light pulse that could easily be missed. But as the crew continued their journey, the pulses became more frequent. And then, one night, as the Odyssey sailed deeper into the uncharted space, something impossible occurred. The entire view outside the observation deck was filled with light, brilliant, almost blinding, streaks of energy flashing in every direction. The ship's instruments went haywire, sending off warning signals. The crew rushed to their stations, trying to make sense of what was happening. "What is that?" Ethan shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "It's the structure," Elon replied, standing up abruptly. "We're close. Too close." The lights intensified, surrounding the ship in a dazzling web of energy. It was as if they had entered the heart of a cosmic storm, where the boundaries between reality and something else were blurring. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing sound echoed throughout the ship, an unnatural hum, a signal coming from the heart of the phenomenon. It wasn't the static or distortion they had expected. This was a call. "Is that communication?" asked one of the engineers, his voice trembling. "It has to be," Elon said, his voice barely a whisper. The crew held their breath. They were about to make contact with whatever was on the other side of the universe. The moment of truth had arrived. Without warning, the energy storm around them ceased. The lights dimmed, and the hum faded, leaving the ship in an eerie silence. For a few moments, nothing happened. But then, just as quickly as the storm had appeared, a new signal flooded their systems. It was a series of coordinates, glowing on the ship's monitor, pinpointing a location at the heart of the structure they had been following. It was a precise, calculated destination, one that led directly to the center of the alien artifact. "This is it," Elon said, his voice filled with awe. "We're about to enter." The ship's engines hummed to life as the crew prepared to make the final jump into the unknown. The vast alien structure loomed in the distance, an enigma that would soon be within reach. Elon took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. He could feel the weight of history bearing down on him. This was no longer about exploration. This was about humanity's future. The world, and everything they knew, would never be the same. The Odyssey hurtled through the void, its sleek hull cutting through the dark expanse toward the coordinates provided by the alien signal. The crew, now fully prepared for whatever lay ahead, braced themselves for the final leg of their extraordinary journey. They had crossed light years of space, decoded cryptic messages, and navigated mysterious phenomena. But as they neared the alien structure, a sense of unease filled the air. The moment arrived. Through the observation deck windows, the crew saw it, a colossal structure, unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It was an intricate web of metal and energy, pulsating with a strange glow that seemed to breathe in rhythm with the cosmos itself. The structure's size was mind-boggling, far larger than any ship or station, its form constantly shifting as if alive, responding to the presence of the Odyssey. Elon stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the spectacle before him. "It's beautiful," he whispered, awestruck. "This is what we've been searching for." But the beauty was deceiving. There was a sharp, unnatural coldness to the structure. It was too perfect, too symmetrical. And yet, within its perfect form, Elon could sense an intelligence, a mind beyond anything they had imagined. "We've arrived," Ethan said, his voice steady but tinged with a sense of urgency. "The question is, what now?" Elon didn't answer right away. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. The mysteries of the universe, the questions that had haunted humanity for centuries, all led to this. But what lay inside? And what would it mean for Earth? For humanity? "We enter," Elon finally said. "We've come this far. We have no choice but to make contact." As the Odyssey approached the structure, the lights on the ship began to flicker. The systems buzzed with an almost palpable hum, as if the ship was being scanned, analyzing, probing, and communicating. The ship's instruments registered strange energy readings, some of which were incomprehensible to human understanding. The structure seemed to be reacting to them, as if aware of their presence, yet not hostile. Suddenly, the ship jolted, as though it had passed through an invisible barrier. The crew quickly checked the systems, but everything appeared stable, almost too stable. The tension was palpable. They were in the structure now, orbiting its core, but no one could say what to expect next. Then, the voice came. It was soft at first, like a whisper, an echo that reverberated through the walls of the ship. At first, the crew didn't understand, but then, the words took form. "Welcome, travelers. You have found what many before you could not. You are now at the threshold of knowledge beyond your comprehension." The voice was not human. It was something far older, far wiser, and it was speaking directly to them. Elon stood frozen, staring at the console as the voice continued, its tone neither threatening nor welcoming, but something in between. "You have crossed vast distances and defied the limitations of your world. Yet, you know nothing. You are children playing in the vastness of existence. But you may learn." The crew exchanged nervous glances. Elon's mind raced. This was the moment they had prepared for. But had they truly prepared for something so profound? Ethan took a step forward, voice trembling. Who are you?" There was a pause, and the voice seemed to shift in pitch, as if considering the question. Then, it spoke again. "We are the architects. We are the keepers of knowledge, the sentinels of the cosmos. We exist beyond your understanding. We have watched your kind grow and falter, evolve and destroy. But now, you are at a crossroads. What you do next will determine the future of your species." Elon felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice steady despite the rising anxiety. "What do you want from us?" We seek understanding. Your species is on the verge of a great change. You will either embrace the knowledge we offer, or you will remain trapped in your limited existence, repeating the same mistakes as those who came before you. The words were cryptic, but they carried an undeniable weight, a weight that pressed on Elon's chest, suffocating him with the realization of just how small and insignificant humanity was in the grand scheme of the universe. The voice fell silent, leaving only the hum of the ship's systems. The crew stood in stunned silence, processing what they had just heard. Elon took a deep breath, stepping forward to address the entity. We're ready, he said, his voice full of determination. We want to learn. We want to understand. But we need to know what to do. The silence stretched on, but then the voice returned. You have chosen wisely. There is a path before you, a path that will lead to the unlocking of powers beyond your comprehension. But it is not without cost. You will be tested. The knowledge we offer is not free. It will require sacrifice. You must be willing to give up what you hold most dear. Elon's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What kind of sacrifice? The voice didn't answer directly. Instead, a holographic image appeared before them, an intricate series of symbols and geometric patterns spinning in midair. The symbols seemed to represent concepts beyond human comprehension, ideas of existence, time, and reality itself. The cost is your humanity. If you seek to transcend your current limitations, you must give up your understanding of yourself, your world, and your place in it. You must be willing to change, to evolve into something more than you are. Elon's mind raced as he looked at the crew. The decision was monumental, one that could alter the course of humanity forever. To accept the knowledge and evolve, or to reject it and remain bound by the constraints of their own existence. Ethan, standing beside him, spoke up, his voice calm but firm. What if we don't accept? What happens then? If you do not accept, you will remain as you are, trapped in the cycle of progress and destruction. The choice is yours, but remember, the consequences of your decision will echo through eternity. There was a long pause. Elon stood frozen, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had always believed in pushing humanity forward, in expanding the boundaries of what was possible. But this was different. And then, the voice spoke once more. The time to choose is now. Will Elon and the crew accept the path that leads to transcendence, or will they turn away from the unknown and remain in the comfort of the familiar? The future of humanity hangs in the balance. The decision is theirs to make.